Hey, welcome everybody. It is July 9th, 2023 on a Sunday, in a very warm Sunday. I think it was 99 degrees when I last looked out here in Austin. Very warm Sunday in Austin, Texas, indeed. Welcome to the Sunday Show. I'm Jimmy Snow, and I am joined by Matt Dillahunty. And right here at the top, I want to warn people throughout. I'm presently dealing with some medical stuff, and there is a very good chance that there will be significant blocks of this show that will be Matt solo. If I was better prepared, that wouldn't be the case. But I up until like 10 to 15 minutes ago was like, I feel sick, but I'll be okay. And then right before Matt got here, I was like, oh no, I'm not okay. So that's,
you may need to leave the show to go, be ill on occasion. But when he's here, he's here. And,
that's right.
That's hot buttered awesome.
That's right. How are you, Matt?
He's going to be leaving on occasion to go fuck himself. That's basically what we decided.
I wish. I think I don't have the physical fortitude to do that. But how are you?
I'm all right. I've had obviously there's a lot going on. We unfortunately had a gecko that we recently bought die.
Bummer.
And we contacted the person we bought it from. We haven't heard back yet, but it's, we've had it for a week and like 2 or 3 days. And we did a few other things. I still haven't finished mowing the lawn because I have an electric lawnmower, and I let the grass get high enough that the electric lawnmower mowed 90% of the lawn, but left a strip when the battery died. So I'm going to go do that after the show. I've had
almost the exact same thing happen to me recently with I let the back way overgrow, which Dexter loved. But anyway, I let the back overgrow, and I had to put the wheels all the way at the highest, because with an electric motor, you also have a reduction in, is it torque, I think, that it has less of?
Yeah.
And so I
constantly adjust.
I had to do it first on the highest setting and go pretty slowly, and then go back over the whole thing again. And I ran out of battery before I finished the highest setting the first time.
Yeah, I just left it on the lowest setting and ran over everything twice, or like cut half. But basically, you just use more battery. Anyway. Doesn't matter. I had an interesting, I switched. Well, I haven't switched. I am now also on Threads, Matt Dillahunty on Threads. Threads has gotten like 90 million subscribers in the first 4 days, and Twitter volume has decreased. I'm pretty much only like calling people out on Twitter and not remotely biting my tongue until I get banned from Twitter. I've never even been suspended. I've never been suspended or temporarily suspended from Facebook or any social media ever, and yet I kind of want to get banned from Twitter. But I went after Blair White, who I told her to get the fuck out of my town. She's here in the Austin area, and she had a run-in with a homeless person who evidently stood outside of her car and like yelled at her for almost a whole minute, and it made Blair want to go get an open carry permit so that she could carry a weapon. And I was like, why? You're in a car, someone's yelling at you from outside the car, and this was so traumatizing for you that you want to get an open carry permit for what? So you can threaten them, so you can shoot them? Get the fuck out of my city, you violent, terrified, fuckhead. And it was extra funny because somebody came in and said, now my divorce makes sense to them, because I clearly don't have any empathy and didn't empathize with Blair. And that it's like I don't understand what women, and especially trans women, go through. And so I was, for the first time ever, I was able to tag my former partner, my ex-wife, my current partner, to have both of them point and laugh at the idiot who thinks he understands why I got divorced and who thinks that I don't understand what trans women go through. And to be fair, I don't, but because I'm not a trans woman. But between the two of us, I think the one that's in my position might be on firmer footing than the individual who's trying to defend Anna Kasparian.
Yeah. Which, funny you should bring that up. Somebody had actually super chatted asking if we would address the Anna Kasparian and TYT anti-trans stuff. And for that super chat, I'm mostly going to say, tune in this Thursday. And if they don't address it, that's definitely the time to also super chat or call in about it. But the Transatlantic Call-In show, Yeah, obviously both Matt and I are very well, do you say disappointed when you didn't have high expectations of them in the first place?
Oh,
Anna,
I stopped listening to Anna and Jink years ago when they tried to do this atheists are just as bad as theists thing.
Yeah, that was very, very stupid also. But yeah, definitely the Transatlantic Call-In Show would be the place that we're going to say, they always have that disclosure at the beginning of a lot of shows. The views, whatever, said on this program do not necessarily represent the views of blah, blah, blah. Well, the views represented on the Transatlantic Call-In Show this Thursday are representative of the views of the line. I'll say that very directly, and that's who you should call and talk to about that.
I will say, I tweeted. I always tweet out, and as soon as there's a browser viable access to Threads, I'll be posting on Threads announcements for the shows and stuff like that as well. What I tweeted out today was, did you go to church? And if so, why don't you call in and tell us why and what you learned, and perhaps defend it, because I'm genuinely interested. It's been early on when I was doing the Atheist Experience, so this is 15, 20 years ago. I would occasionally go to churches around Austin. I would go visit the mega church or the tiny local church and hear what was being preached, because I don't ever want to straw man believers. I wanted to talk about what they were actually teaching in church. Then social media really took off, and it was no longer necessary for me to talk about what people were, or to go to church to talk about it, because you could just watch church, and you could watch the churches that were very, very popular as well. And so what I'd like, we often find it difficult to find theists. There's already a theist on hold, so I'm not going to talk for more than 30 seconds before we just get on to callers. But
sure,
we often find it difficult to find people who are willing to call in and defend their beliefs. That I think we may be able to mitigate that a little bit by saying, if you went to church this morning for real, and we're going to have to take your word for it, I would love to hear why you went, what you learned, and do you agree with it and think other people should go and learn this too? That's the key right there, because people want to pretend, oh, well, you're just trying to straw man. Cliff Connectley in the last debate that I did tried to lie and pretend that I'm just portraying Christians as gullible rubes. Yeah. Because I pointed to a gullible rube who happened to also be a Christian. That's Cliff's failure to understand a logical argument, that an example of something doesn't necessarily paint the entire group. But we have callers. Jimmy, you have one more thing you wanted to say.
Yeah.
At least.
Just on the off chance that I am away when the perfect opportunity would be up, I'm excited I really want someone to call in with an anecdote of why their religion is true, because I now have prepped. Okay, if that's true, is it proof that we live in a video game simulation of which I am the main character, just because within a week of my deciding Twitter was too terrible that I had to quit it? That within a week of that, a new service launched that I love, in being Threads. That's my new anecdote for the hard solipsism video game featuring Jimmy Snow, to counter the anecdotes of proof of God. That's the one I got ready. It's in the chamber. But now
we are going to start off. We've got a gentleman named Ash, pronouns are he, him, a theist somewhere in the United States, who's a Christian creationist who thinks he can convince people atheism is false. And Ash, I think there's already a point of confusion, but rather than turn it into a big deal, I'm just going to point out that atheism is a position of not being convinced of something, which means that it can't be false. But if you're going to claim that atheism is false, I'm going to be as charitable as possible and suggest that what you're saying then is that you can demonstrate that some God does exist. Is that what you're doing?
Yes, I appreciate that.
Sweet. Go for it.
Well, I guess just to talk about like what you're talking about, like church, and sorry, my throat's a little messed up today. I recently did a Bible study.
Ash, all I need, I mean, I'm happy to hear what you learned about in church, but I mean, you specifically said that you can prove that a God exists. So all I need is for you to define God and present the proof that a God exists, right?
Yes. So
cool.
I'll do that. basically, if you go to bit.ly/atheism, I've basically written out why atheism, or at least like God exists.
Ash, this a live call-in show? I don't need you to advertise the website that you've got. I just need you to define the God that you're going to demonstrate, and then demonstrate it.
Okay, so I guess I'd define God as like someone who's created us.
Someone who has created us. Us as in like all humans? Or
yes.
Okay. And that's the sum total of your definition of God, is that all humans were created by the same individual?
Well, I guess like the story of Genesis, or that like
Ash, I really think you should take another shot at this, because Matt's already improving your definition for you. You came in with someone who created us. So far with your definition, my parents are gods. So let's.
Yes. I see the misstep.
So let's go with a good definition of God, and maybe start over, because that one sucked.
Okay, essentially, I'm arguing for creationism.
Okay.
Christian-based creationism, Muslim-based creationism, Hindu-based creationism. Which form of creationism would you like to say you are advocating for?
Well, I'm personally Christian, but of course, I feel like what religion to choose is a separate topic.
It may be helpful, though, in us isolating and making this quicker than going to your OnlyFans/atheism.
I mean, the issue here is that, what religion to choose. I don't care what religion you think someone should choose or what somebody else should choose. I care about which one you're actually trying to defend. And so when you say, sure, well, doesn't Christianity and Judaism have exactly the same creation story?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're basically saying you're defending Genesis. Now, I just finished a debate recently where somebody said there's no science in Genesis. Do you think that, like, for example, Genesis 1 and 2 provide actual claims, factual claims about the process and order of creation events, or is it metaphor?
I know a lot of people believe it's metaphor. I'm not like, it's not a hard stance personally, but I do think it's like, I take it literally.
Okay. So when Genesis says that the order of events was that there was a beginning, and then a primitive earth, and then light, and then atmosphere, and then dry land, and then land plants, and then the sun, the moon, and the stars after plants and light, and then sea monsters and flying creatures, and then wild and tamed beasts and mammals, and then man. That's the order of events in Genesis 1. But the real order that we know from science is different. Are you saying that the order of events that science presents, where there's a beginning, there's light, and then there's sun and stars, and then there's primitive earth, moon, and atmosphere, and then dry land and sea creatures and land plants, and then land, and going on like this? Are you saying that science has the order wrong and Genesis has the order right?
Well, I think the essence of science is like disagreement to some extent. I also think the entire premise of
you could answer Matt's question instead.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
Yes. Since if I take it literally, and if you believe that's like the official science stance.
So we have an order of events from science that is backed up by the natural sciences and is consistent with all of the available evidence that we have. And you're saying you can prove that that's wrong and that Genesis order is correct.
I think so.
Okay, go for it. Prove it wrong.
Okay, I mean, the entire starting like premise of Christianity is that there is like an omnipotent creator. I mean, generally, like the idea of evolution is like looking at things, how they've adapted, and it's really just like a difference of they were created intentionally to be like adapted to that area versus like not.
I'm sorry, Ash, but I set this all up for you so that you could show that the order of events that science proclaims is wrong. And what you said was that the premise of Christianity is that there's an omnipotent creator. Well, first of all, that's irrelevant. That doesn't demonstrate that science has the order wrong at all. As a matter of fact, it has nothing at all to do with the order. And you don't get to begin by assuming there's an omnipotent creator when that's the very thing that you're supposed to be proving. And then you went on to say that the idea of evolution is looking at things and seeing how they've adapted. That has absolutely nothing to do with the order of events in Genesis or the order of events observed from science. Evolution is about explaining the diversity of biological life, has nothing to do with whether or not light preceded the stars, which preceded dry land at all. So I'm trying to figure out how you are going to disprove science, and all you've said so far is that Christianity believes there's an omnipotent creator and evolution looks at how things adapt. Neither of those is relevant to the order of events.
Ash, I think, added there at the end, and I want to correct this too, just in case it gets passed. Ash, I think you were trying to say the alternate explanation to why so many creatures have adapted to their environment was that they were created for that environment. And again, I'm improving, like we did with the definition, I'm improving what you actually said and trying to steelman it a little bit better, that it is the alternative explanation. Instead of saying they all have this diversity because they adapted to that area, it could be that the creator created them for that area. However, that also flies in the face of scientific discovery, as we can both track the development of both the climate, the geology, the actual areas through not just the fossil record, but also, separate from that, we can see evolution observed in a lab. We can watch species deviate and adapt and change. There's some really awesome ones. If you want to watch bacteria go from mostly antibiotic susceptible to antibiotic resistant in only a couple generations, and in only a few in a confined space, you can literally watch evolution happen. And then they've done it with some actual animals and stuff, certain types of flies and stuff, because you have, unfortunately, lifespans do matter as far as the adaptation goes, but we can still observe that adaptation happening in the lab. So it's not just if we just found a bunch of animals and it was like, oh, this animal seems suited for this place and this animal seems suited for this place, sure, you could posit your hypothesis as one of the explanations. That hypothesis is long debunked.
But I guess my only evidence.
Go ahead.
I guess the only evidence then would be the Bible, because, like, I guess the ultimate question is, like, is Christianity true?
Yeah. So that's kind of the question I was getting to, is that you think that science is wrong and the Bible is correct, wherever they come in conflict. What's the justification for believing that?
Well, I guess, a lot of people like talk about how, like, I do indeed have the burden of proof. So just to deliver on that burden of proof and to disprove atheism, bit.ly/atheism.
Stop. If you promote your OnlyFans one more time, you're banned forever.
Wait, does that actually link to an OnlyFans? Does that mean that Ash is a lying little?
No, I'm being a dick.
No.
If you try to promote some exterior website and use this as an advertising opportunity, you are on our show, Ash, saying you can disprove atheism. You're talking to two atheists. So either you're here to draw traffic to your website because you want the ad revenue, or you can actually do what you're claiming, and you can do it right now and talking to us. But I swear, if you try to promote again, instead of acting like a coward and trying to back out and recede into a something that I think you're just trying to draw attention to and hope you're going to get responses to. And I'm going to tell you this right now, Ash. I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that nobody who networks with the line does a response video or ever addresses or mentions your specific website ever, unless you here and now present your arguments and actually defend that either atheism is false or that Christianity is true, which is what you called it, saying you could do.
Yeah, I apologize for advertising there. I think you're right.
I know
I'm not ad revenue. It's just a Google Doc.
I got it. I went to the address. I'm sitting here. Hang on, Ash. just listen and think for a second. I'm looking at the document that you desperately wanted me to see. I will not be reading it right now because I'm doing a show. However,
yeah, of course, I apologize.
The thing is that you're saying that you can disprove science, and then when we drill down to it, because I'm genuinely trying to be as charitable as possible, what you're saying is
Right.
not that you can disprove science, but that you just disregard science when it conflicts with your understanding of the Bible. So the question then, what is the mechanism by which you can demonstrate that your understanding of the Bible is accurate and true sufficiently
Okay,
sufficiently
I'll do
to
that.
toss aside all of the science on these subjects? Because this is a lot of subjects you're throwing out right off the bat. Every cosmology, biology, you're throwing out nearly all of science, at least in the physical sciences. By the way, I'll ask this because it seems dangerous. Do you think that the Earth's age is closer to 10,000 years than it is to 4.5 billion years?
If I had to guess, yes.
Okay. So you really are just disregarding any science that doesn't agree with your understanding. So what is the mechanism by which you can show to any reasonable person that your understanding of the Bible is correct?
Yes, I'll do that. I think there's a lot of disagreement in science. I would say that if I can prove that like God exists, then there's a question of which religion is most likely to be true. And I think when compared to other religions, Christianity comes out on top. And then from that, if Christianity is like the best option and there is a God, then there is a good point to say that, hey, maybe the stuff in the Bible has some more backing to this.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry.
Terrible.
You said that you are disregarding science in favor of the Bible. And when I asked what method, what mechanism can you use to show that your particular understanding of the Bible is true, is correct, is the most reasonable, should be accepted, what you said is
Evidence.
No, sir, you didn't say evidence. I'm still talking. What you said was there's a lot of disagreement in science, which to whatever extent there may or may not be a disagreement in science, that is irrelevant to whether or not your understanding of the Bible is the one that's correct. There could be massive disagreement in science, and that would in no way be relevant to whether or not your understanding of the Bible is true. Meanwhile, there is not massive disagreement in science on the age of the earth or the probable order of events in Genesis being inaccurately mapped to science. So your first point, that when asked, how do you demonstrate that you're correct? When you say there's a lot of disagreement in science, that is completely irrelevant in a fallacious argument. Your second sentence after that was, if I can prove God exists, then we need to figure out which God in Christianity comes out on top in your opinion. Well, I'm sorry, Ash, but if you call in to the show to say that you can prove God, then it's stupid for you to say, if I can prove God, instead of just proving it. So you're willing to toss out all of science that disagrees with your understanding of the Bible, and when asked for a mechanism by which you can demonstrate that your understanding of the Bible is correct, your mechanism isn't a mechanism. It is, there's disagreement in science, and if I can prove God, I think Christianity is the best one. Are you fucking serious, Ash?
I would like to rescind the if. I think I have disproven atheism.
Do it then.
Ash,
right now. Do it.
Disprove atheism right fucking now, or I'm dropping you like a bad habit.
Honestly, the documents.
No.
Pages,
What do we say?
Goodbye,
No, wait.
Goodbye.
I want to give him another shot.
No, you can do it.
Know the document. You can either represent what's in the document here, or you can shut the fuck up. You should know your own argument. By the way, I skimmed it. It's garbage. It's real bad.
I'm tempted to do an entire show. I'm tempted to take your 6.5 page document here and do an entire, cause I want to walk through of exactly how bad it is. Because here we are. Argument 1, you will die today. The first argument is pretty intuitive. I'm listening. I'm talking. The first argument is pretty intuitive. I'll tell you where my journey began. Let me give you a pro tip here, Ash. No argument for the existence of God has any need for you to tell any part of your story. That's not how arguments work. That's not how evidence works. You and your story are irrelevant to whether or not there's a God. But you don't tell your story. You say, my first thought was this. There's the idea that the human body replaces all of its cells over 7 years. Whether or not this is true isn't important. It's just for getting the idea across. If your body's entirely composed of new matter every 7 years, we're going into ship of Theseus territory, which you clearly don't understand, or you wouldn't have gone down this route. I could fisk your entire 6.5 pages for fun, but we gave you the opportunity to present your case at least a half a dozen times here, and you have failed at every opportunity to do anything more than say, I proved it in my document. Here's the link. Well, get fucked. What do you got for us today?
Honestly, I won't take up any more of your guys' time. I think I've
You're
done that.
goddamn right you won't take up any more of my time. You don't even get to finish your sentence on not taking up any more of my time. You should be absolutely fucking embarrassed. Absolutely embarrassed. I sat here and played nice because you said that you were going to disprove atheism. And I started off by pointing out that there's nothing to disprove. Atheism does not make a positive claim for you to debunk. It is merely the position of not accepting theism. And so I lifted up your argument and I held it up and I said, okay, so what you're really saying is that you can prove there's a God. Cool, let's do that. I don't need to rewalk through the call. Everybody saw it. Your argument 1, you will die today. Argument 2, a very specific coincidence.
Well, and if you go further down, he goes, these are the 3 options. Everything is actually a coincidence, which isn't the scientific representation, by the way. Just because we don't understand the odds and the things that led to it, if science bears out, the chances of human life on Earth are 100%. So you wouldn't call it a coincidence. You would call things doing the things they do in nature the way you expect them to do it. Just because we don't know all those parameters in advance doesn't make something a giant coincidence. The concept of anything that isn't planned for by an entity as a coincidence is idiotic. But also, the document begins like a terrible movie narration. I bet you're wondering how I got here. But to tell you that, we're going to have to go back a ways. I'm going to tell you my story.
Like if it weren't mostly a waste of time, I would love. So you guys can do it. Bit-Lee.
I think this is what he wants. I think I don't even. He was so bad. I'm not convinced he is genuine, and that it may just be about getting people to open the link in the hopes of getting people to cover it as a video, which is why I'm reluctant to promote it in any way.
Okay, but I'm still so. One of the things is that we already had somebody call in recently with this, all your cells are replaced every 7 years. So it's like Ash listened to a couple of the worst arguments from the last week.
Yeah.
And so this argument about all your cells getting replaced 7 years. Then there's the coincidence of this. But then if you get down to page, let's see, on page 5 of 7, it says, now for the actual argument. Even if we say that there are atheist answers for consciousness and qualia, which is the other thing that came up in a discussion this past week, qualia, there's still a massive issue. What did my domino set up brain just do for you? The body was physically set up to rant about it, blah, blah, blah. This leaves with only 3 possibilities. It's really just a massive coincidence. Consciousness only comes to those physically set up with the obscure belief that they are experiencing a conscious phenomenon, or intentional design. There is no syllogism here. There is no evidence here. This is at best a philosophical thought experiment by somebody who hasn't even taken an intro to philosophy or logic.
Yeah.
It is absolutely a train wreck. And then he's like, additional addresses. Once again, qualia itself cannot have physical impact. I reject the concept of qualia, which we've already talked about. But so here at the end, to briefly summarize the argument, since qualia has no physical impact, then my unrelated rant and belief of qualia would make far more sense under intentional design rather than coincidence. But even his attempt at an argument just says intentional design, and then in bold, the one that I would argue is most likely. So his case isn't, I can demonstrate that a God exists. His case is, I think that intentional design by a God is more likely than not, or more likely than the, that's it. And I think so because of qualia.
Be cautious.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, be cautious, everyone who's thinking about opening that document, because it may also be an attempt to get your email addresses if you are signed into Google when you open it, if you decide you want to do it. I most recommend nobody do it. But if you are absolutely set on doing it, one, you should know two things. If this person pays for Bitly, they can change what that link brings you to after the fact. So if this is just a matter of trying to get people to follow a link because of this, there is a chance that it is going to send you to some sign-in page where the whole thing is a goddamn scam. That is something that could be afoot.
You should delete it.
Delete the call? Or censor it?
I don't know. Is there a way for us to put a mute over every time he says the thing?
We can cut out the 2 times he said the address. Cool. But it will take it'll take like a whole day for YouTube to commit that change.
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the thing. First of all, welcome again, everybody, to the Sunday Show. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me, as almost always, is Jimmy Snow, who's managing to struggle through feeling miserable, and doing a stellar job of it so that he doesn't abandon me. But we genuinely want calls from theists. If you went to church today, I'd like to know why. Genuinely, I'm not going to trash talk you. Why did you go to church? What is your motivation for going? Do you think other people should go? What did you learn in church? Do you think these are valuable lessons for other people to learn? Ash, I don't think Ash went to church today. I don't think Ash goes to church or has a great understanding of this stuff at all. It's strange that he's got a 6.5-page document that isn't an argument, that consists only, and he was the first caller, it consists only of the cells being replaced every 7 years and qualia thing, which are exactly the conversations that Forrest and I had last week.
This is why this sticks out as conspicuous to me. Also, there are neurons which don't replace. There are some that do, but there are neurons that don't regenerate. There are skeleton cells that don't regenerate. Your red blood cells don't regenerate. They just die. You have to create new ones every time. I know there's more than that, but I haven't taken a nat and phys in over 10 years. Getting old.
It's just
sad.
I don't mind if and I will say this, the other thing that makes Ash incredibly suspicious is that for the most part, he didn't try to talk over us and apologize when we called him out on it, and listened, but didn't actually do anything. Like, didn't make an argument. Just, here's the link to my argument type thing.
And then the argument won, you will die today. Now listen, I feel like crap, so maybe I will. But if everybody else doesn't, argument 1 fails. It was in big, bold letters.
It's extra sad for me. Now, granted, I beat up on Cliff Connectley several times over the last couple of weeks because the last debate we had was embarrassingly bad. But at least Cliff's position is there's no science in Genesis, which he's wrong about. I mean, he's wrong. There is a listed order of events there. And if you want to just say it's all metaphor, there's still no excuse for getting the order so wrong that it contradicts an order from science.
Yeah.
But he's like, he wouldn't even address anything other than say, there's no science in Genesis. There's no science in Genesis. Okay, fine. There's no science being done in Genesis. I agree. But there are factual statements about physical reality being made in Genesis. And that is scientifically subject to scientific inquiry and investigation. That is, you've got one theist who's in a debate and is just flat out denying the bald-faced ramifications of accepting Genesis in any way. And then you have Ash, who, if he's to be believed, and frankly, I don't believe Ash, if Ash is to be believed, then he takes a literal view on Genesis and accepts it over the actual scientific information. The very same science that evaluates the half-life of atoms that results in us understanding electronics and allowing us to build electronics and things like that, that allows us to do the various radiometric dating. That same science, that physics is used in the very communication mediums we have for him to call us to deny the science. It's like standing on a plane, flying over the United States and telling the person next to you that you don't believe in aerodynamics.
The amount of rare earth metals in your phone alone, and to say to somebody that all got there within the last 10,000 years is pretty. Whoo, oh, buddy.
All right.
I kind of want to do Jeffrey and then the call that's queuing up, but it's being screened at the moment.
Jeffrey in Texas, pronouns are he, him. Welcome to the show again.
Oh, thanks. Well, thanks for welcoming me back. Yeah, I did a little bit of soul searching, so to speak. I think the last conversation, I know y'all got, I don't remember it too well, but I know y'all were telling me, go do a little bit of research on why you should respect religion, something like along those lines.
I honestly, Jeffrey, I don't remember the call, so there's no reason to rehash it. Apart from if you've got some lesson learned you want to bring up, that's cool.
Okay. Well, I feel like for me, I've always had my mom, she's religious. A few of my family members are religious, so I'm a deconverted Christian, I guess you can say, and so I kind of learned to keep my distance from them a little bit and try to avoid the conversation. But when it comes up, I'm pretty adamant about, well, I don't think it's important to know if there is or isn't a God. I don't think it's important to know there is or isn't a heaven or hell. And I think it's important how you treat people. And that's usually my response. And I don't know if that is something that you guys, would think that's a pretty good approach or not. So I guess I wanted to know what y'all think about that.
What do we think about respecting people?
If it comes down to just, respecting people, I think that's the most important thing.
But so you're calling in about respecting religion, and I think that we just need to make sure that we put a hard line down and say respecting a person versus respecting a person's beliefs are two completely detached concepts. Whether you respect a person has nothing to do with whether or not you respect their beliefs or not. I'm not going to cut in front of the bathroom. I'm not going to cut in line in front of the bathroom because somebody thinks that as a homosexual, I'm going to, bisexual, but just because somebody thinks that I'm queer and therefore I'm going to hell, that's not going to give me the right to cut in front of them in the bathroom because I don't respect them as a person. I still respect their humanity and their personhood, but I don't respect or owe respect to the beliefs they hold.
So what would that respect look like?
I won't cut in front of them in the bathroom. It's basic human decency. If a person asks me for help, I have
at them, not talking down to them, not being condescending. Would that be respectful?
If we're talking about whether or not I'm going to hell for being queer, I might condescend to them, but that's going to be the conversation at hand. If they ask me for $1 because they're homeless and they also think I'm queer, I'm not going to condescend or think that I'm going to hell because I'm queer. I'm not going to condescend to them for that belief independent of whether or not I'm going to give them $1 or not. In fact, I'm sure I've given many homophobes $1.
Yeah. You said that you said something interesting and then asked for our view on it, which is that you've kind of come to grasp that it's not so important whether or not a God exists as much as it is about how you treat people. Now, I think that in spirit of what you're saying, I kind of agree. Unfortunately, the God belief thing has incredible consequences. And if in fact there is an eternal life, then everything about this life becomes a vanishingly small percentage of the totality of life, which means knowing whether or not there's likely to be an afterlife is the most important thing, because you're going to spend 99.9999999 repeating part of your total life plus afterlife in the afterlife, if such a thing exists. And so I think there's significance to knowing that. But also, when you look around the world and you see that of the 8 billion people on the planet, 6 billion-ish of them believe in some kind of God somewhere. It would be absurd to say that this wasn't important, even from merely a sociological perspective, to understand how and why people believe what they believe and whether or not they're correct. On the front of respecting people being more important, I mostly agree. I think that some people confuse respect with capitulation or respect with coddling. I respect individuals' rights to believe as their conscience dictates. None of them owe me an explanation. I'm happy to have them call in. I don't go door to door knocking and saying, hey, have you stopped believing in Jesus or Yahweh yet? I don't try to legislate their beliefs away, but calling out their often bigoted views
Flawed logic. That
is
yeah.
What's that? Yeah, calling out flawed logic, calling out flawed reasoning, calling out bigoted views, calling out their incredibly privileged position and their preferential status. Those things are important, and they are about respecting humanity and not respecting an individual over humanity. And so a lot of things that seem disrespectful, when I say that, the other day on Twitter, when I pointed out that Muhammad was a child rapist who encourages other child rapists to make excuses for that, that's me absolutely disrespecting Muhammad, disrespecting Islam, disrespecting the Quran, which I will do all the time, because Muhammad's not alive, and I'll disrespect the ideas and the books and the religion, and anybody who wants to make excuses for child brides and child rapes can get fucked. Islam is an absolute abomination when it comes to morality, and Christianity is right there with it, really freaking close, just not as obvious. I don't normally have Christian apologists trying to defend sex with a 4-year-old like Muslim apologists have repeatedly. And so for me, the most respectful thing I can do is call bullshit, to call people out on their bullshit so that they have the opportunity to either be a better person, or then they have the opportunity to correct me so that I become a better person. The notion of respect being, well, we all have our opinions. There's no way to know who's right. Let me not challenge your opinion. I'm sure that it's important to you and you have your truth and your reality. That disrespects humanity and reason, and I won't put up with it.
Yeah, Jeffrey, my one sentence rebuttal to what you said is basically all of societal progress has happened on the back of disrespect.
Yeah, but that's kind of where we're at. So hopefully that answered your question.
Anything else, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I do. I want to add a few things. Like, I think, well, to break down the heaven and hell thing, I think, yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. It's an important question to ask. And if it's Christian views, I don't know a lot about the Quran or any other religions or anything like that, but if it's Christian views, because I come from a Christian background, I always kind of tell Christians that, well, wouldn't it make sense that treating people is what's most important? Because you got the story of the Good Samaritan, and you got the story of God dividing the people who knew him not.
It's not a meaningful question, though, Jeffrey, because one, there are lots of examples in Christianity where evil is done in the name of what they call love, and what they consider respectful as mandated by their religion. If you and I were just talking about from a secular humanist perspective, and we got every religious person to adopt secular humanism before their religious beliefs, then sure, we could say that that's the deal. Religions tell you how to treat people, and they tell you that if you do what the religion says, that's being good, that's being respectful. Mormonism believes going out and preaching and trying to convert people to a homophobic and racist cult is good and respectful for people, and encouraging their members to vote. And while they won't directly say what for, they'll tell you on what issue against people's human rights is good and respectful. And so we're talking about conversations, and we're talking about a specific source of motivation amongst a ton of the population that is constantly getting people to do shitty things in the name of respect, because they get to define what being respectful is. So going up to a Christian and saying it should be about how you treat the person, they can say, I totally agree, and according to my religion, the right way to treat a person with respect is A, B, C, D, and it can all be terrible, humane shit.
But you mentioned the Good Samaritan.
I know you said, Jimmy. Oh yeah, I was going to address Jimmy real quick. No, I know he said earlier that civilization was founded on the backs of disrespect.
Actually, I said societal progress is had on the back of disrespect.
Disrespect. Right. So maybe don't you think that's the problem?
No. I think it was absolutely the best thing the civil rights movement could do to say, fuck you, racists. We will not capitulate. And it's time to fucking put your money where your mouth is, because the civil rights movement also had heavy Christian tones in it, because it turns out a lot of Christians, a lot of people of color in America are religious, and they actually were disrespecting other people's religion on the basis of they share the same religion and don't agree with how they're being treated. So there, the religion didn't actually matter. They actually were able to weaponize it too. Obviously, that's not the entirety of the movement, and there's a lot of secular humanist values in the civil rights movement. But fuck no, I don't think that's the problem. I think that's why there is progress. I think if you just sit there and are polite and you leave the restaurant, shut up for a second. Jeffrey, I define disrespect as you talking the fuck over me. I think that if you just sit there politely and go, no, I'm not going to get up from your diner. I'm not going to let business continue as usual. I'm going to get up before the dogs and the hoses come. And I'm going to stop doing this disrespectful thing. I think society doesn't progress. I think we live in a super hyper capitalist society that the winners are born winners and they die winners. And the only way to upset that is usually through disrespect. And so every movement where the underclassed people or the wildly disrespected people by society have been able to break free of that has been basically by getting together collectively and disrespecting together. That is called a protest. It's why this country exists, and it's why the civil rights movement and every meaningful progressive change to society has happened. Now I am done talking, Jeffrey, and you may resume.
So, okay. So I was going to say is that it was basically respectfully disobeying or civilly disobeying.
No. If you shut down a business...
Who you been listening to? You've been listening to Anna Kasparian?
Yeah.
You've been listening to Anna Kasparian's re-fucking tread of the civil rights movement, pretending...
I don't even know who that is.
Good enough.
Yeah, okay. Well, she's the one who's been trotting out this line in the last week. She managed to get it wrong about the civil rights movement and trans rights and everything else. You know, Samuel L. Jackson has an arrest record for locking, I think it was teachers up inside of a school or something for a couple days. You mentioned the Good Samaritan. What's the story of the Good Samaritan?
The story of the Good Samaritan is he saw somebody in trouble and he helped them out in layman's terms.
What kind of trouble?
Like that. I think he got robbed naked, basically.
Yeah. So he comes across somebody who had been robbed and beaten, and he had mercy on that person and helped him out, bound up his wounds, did all that stuff. What the hell does that have to do with respect for that individual's ideas? Well,
it wasn't clear like where that person comes from or if they had a different belief or anything.
What does helping someone who's been beaten have to do with respecting their views? The answer is nothing. The answer is absolutely fucking nothing. That's the whole point of the Good Samaritan, is that even though we disagree on our views, I will help you as a human being. But that doesn't mean I need to respect your views, nor does it mean that I need to help you set up a website to broadcast your hate speech. See, there's a difference between respecting the individual.
I'm not saying all that either.
You're the one that brought up the Good Samaritan. You're the one that brought up the Good Samaritan. Are you going to... Wow. Okay, Jeffrey, I'm done talking. What point is it that you'd like to fucking make?
I'm worried, Jeffrey. I called this a couple of weeks ago. I'm not ready to call it with you the way I was then when I heard something. I'm worried that we just spent 14 minutes on another pedantic asshole who's really just calling in to say, I think that you guys are a little too mean on this show and you would catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Is that the basis of why you're calling in, to tell us we should be more respectful on the basis of what you think the sensitivities of yourself and others should be?
I was going to say that, yes.
Yeah.
But that really wasn't mine.
Goodbye.
Oh, you beat me to it.
Goodbye.
I should have called it. I should have just said, oh, it's this again. And I've been thinking about this for about 10 minutes, but I thought I'm going to let it keep bearing out. If you can do better, I will give you a fucking show on this network.
Damn right.
I will pay you to do a show on this network if you can prove you can do a call-in show better than us. And if I can see that the show is better, but maybe you don't have the audience, I will pay you to bring it here. Period. Jeffrey.
The individuals who have bought into delusions about what the civil rights movement did or didn't do or needed and didn't need to do, what the gay rights movement did or didn't need. You know what the gay rights movement needed? It needed homosexuals in suits being lawyers and homosexuals in ashless chaps out pissing off the public. It needed the over-the-top queer representation on the talk shows that forced people to see, hang on, there's a world I don't know and understand. And it needed the queers who were going to stand up and protest and fight back to say, no, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. It needed all of those things. And if you are saying that, hey, respect means, you just sit there and you just play nice with everybody. No, if you're a bigot, and I'm not going to immedially just, if we're having a conversation, if you say something bigoted, I'm not going to go right off the bat, hey, you're a bigoted piece of shit, get out of here, go away. No, I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to expose that bigotry. And then you have a choice. Then you either get to change your position and acknowledge that you were wrong and a piece of shit and don't want to be, or you get called the piece of shit that you want to be. Yeah. I don't need to play nice with the Ku Klux Klan. I don't need to play nice with white supremacists. I don't need to respect their views or anything else. I'm affording them the rights to continue persisting and existing in the nation that we all share, only to the extent that they aren't making life miserable and deadly for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I get really frustrated with the same thing you were just talking about, the shit that Anna and Jenk have been doing with the... even just to, of course, you can go to Twitter and find the assholes, and to go there to pretend to be this progressive person and go, the worst assholes who are basically saying I deserve to die because I said this stupid thing I said, or whatever, the different versions of that represents the movement, is Fox News shit. The way Fox News shit will say Black Lives Matter is represented by the people who are people of color and in gangs. That's the culture that's associated with Black Lives. It's the same. It's fucking bigoted. It's bigoted as fuck to go out and try and find the worst representatives, the worst loud people of a group, and say they represent the thing at large. And that's what really fucking annoys me about it. When it's you guys are supposed to be the progressive wing. You are a part of a major funding organization that is trying to bring more leftist candidates into the space, and you don't see that you are doing Fox News level bullshit right now. How fucking dare you?
Well, we got a couple other theists, so we have some opportunities for people to tell us some stuff. So we've got, is it Eli in Texas? Pronouns are he, him, wants to tell us why he believes in Jesus. So welcome, Eli.
Hello.
Hello.
Is it Eli correct, or is it Ellie?
Either or is fine.
Oh, okay.
like
I just want to make sure I call you the right thing.
Yeah, it's just like a shortage of my name.
Eli, did you call in last week as a polytheist with a different name?
No, I called in with the same name, but I was a theist.
Okay. All right, go ahead then. You want to explain why you believe in Jesus, presumably as a Christian, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I believe in Jesus because it's like the testimony of the Jews when like God chose Abraham and then his lineage, and well, the Jews exist today, and they have their history in the Torah, and the Torah has like all these prophetic words and everything that's going to happen in terms of the things that God said was going to occur. And then the apostles bore witness to the Messiah, which was the Christ. And that's when, like, it's a whole unified testament. And
Wait. So Eli, you're saying you believe in Jesus, and then you're just telling us what the Bible is. Is that what you're sort of saying?
yeah, it's like various people.
Okay, but so
bearing
none
witness
of
to
that,
the works of God.
none of that would be a demonstration that Jesus exists or a reason to believe in Jesus. For example, you said you believe in Jesus, and the first words out of your mouth was because of the Old Testament is the testament of the Jews or the Torah, but Jews don't believe in Jesus. So, and then you sort of went on to say, and then the apostles testified of Jesus being I suppose, the fulfillment of that. Is that it? Is that the entire basis upon why you believe in Jesus? The claim that the testament of the Jews, which isn't demonstrated to be true, and then the testifying of the apostles, which also isn't demonstrated to be true. Do you have anything that's you feel is demonstrated to be true, or is it just you believe the Bible? You're taking its word for it.
Well, there is other things, but it's like that's like the basis of like our understanding of truth in terms of their testifying of the truth.
No, sir. Our basis for the understanding of truth has nothing to do with any religion. Our basis for understanding truth is reason. Oh, you're saying you believe in Jesus because you believe the Bible. What about people who believe in other religions because they believe that book? Clearly, you can't both be correct. So we need some mechanism to tell us which of you is more likely to be correct, if either of you, because all the various religions can't be correct, but they could all be wrong. So what method do you have to show that your belief is rationally justified?
Okay. Well, we would have to go back to like the root of the beginning of those beliefs. And the root of the beginning of like every other belief is either in skepticism or not skepticism, but like
not skepticism.
It's like evaluating what can be. That's like the basis of Buddhism.
Eli. If somebody says there's a being that exists outside of space-time and he doesn't want you to have sex with someone of the same gender, what mechanism can we use to tell that statement is true?
Okay. Well, there are some functions within humanity that we experience, such as like heartbreak. And I know it's like a small word in comparison to the actual act of that situation.
Eli. Okay, let's say I said there's a tree in my backyard and it has a knot hole in it that looks exactly like Jimmy's nose. How would we demonstrate that this is true?
Well, it's like if you like, there would have to be various other things that would have to go in line with what you're saying. And let's say, how do I demonstrate
Eli, I'm going to stop.
Truthful?
Eli, I'm going to stop because I'm at a point where I do not believe you and where I don't think this is fair. Because I just asked you what mechanism we would use to demonstrate whether or not a tree in my backyard has a knot that looks like Jimmy's nose. And what I got from you was a bunch of babble about we would have to do blah, 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 blah. No, do you realize, let's say I made the statement that I have 2 pair of glasses on my desk. What method would we use to show that that statement is true?
Okay. In the modern age, we can take a picture. And
No.
But in the past, we would have to rely on like other sources and situations.
No,
to
you
depend on
don't
your
have to
testimony.
take a picture. Here are the fucking glasses. I'm holding them up. The method to discerning truth isn't, wow, this is so frustrating, Eli, because I can't even get a straight answer out of you on the basics of demonstrating just a simple statement to be true. I'm going to ask one more time, just because you got somewhere in the ballpark maybe with a picture. What mechanism, what method, what procedure can you use to show that there exists outside of space-time a being that created everything and does not want you to have sex with people of the same gender? What's the mechanism to prove that that's true?
Okay. I'm going to need a little bit of space to explain. Well, first, it would be, there's this experience that most of humanity experiences, if not all, but we'll leave that to... Okay. And then from there...
So far, you're not answering the question, Eli.
No,
you're not answering at all. He asked for a
What you
mechanism.
literally just said. No, I'm muting you. What you literally just said is, first, there's this experience that most of humanity experiences, but will, and then you went on to something else. I think that having conversations with you, I don't want to armchair diagnose anybody, but for some reason, we are unable to have a conversation that actually connects in reality right now, where we're talking clearly about the same thing. It's not, I'm not saying that you're speaking gibberish or word salad. It is, when asked a question, there is some sort of meandering process that your brain goes through, where you just, the sentences make a little bit of sense, but don't make any sense with regard to establishing a mechanism. It's like somehow or another you are not able to say, how would I show that this is true? Because every time we've asked you about this, you've talked about there are experiences, or we would have to go to this, or humanity throughout the years have done this. None of those are mechanisms or paths to truth. And so rather than wasting any more of your time, unless Jimmy wants to,
I have a question.
think we should move on.
Yeah,
okay.
because I recognize the way in which he's engaging as a particularly, it's very, I don't think he's a Mormon, but Mormons do it a lot, and certain types of evangelicals do. So Eli, would you just tell me, for the sake of my curiosity, if nothing else, do you know what brand of Christian you are, which sect of Christianity you follow?
I'm Baptist.
You're Baptist? Is that what you said? Southern Baptist or Northern Baptist? Are you going to hell or the other ones?
I just believe that you baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that's the step of faith.
Okay, but are you Southern Baptist, Independent Fundamentalist Baptist, New Independent Fundamentalist Baptist? Which Baptist are you?
I don't think I have to know that, because it's not mentioned in the Bible.
You're not real. Goodbye. That... I don't know how to engage with that. There's no Baptists who aren't aware, I don't know of any Baptist who would just say, I'm just Baptist. Doesn't matter which one.
As a former Southern Baptist, I will slightly disagree with you, but I get the point, and I think you're mostly correct. I think what the problem is that Eli is very confused about his beliefs and has been told, you need to be baptized as a profession of faith in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But he doesn't go to a church. He doesn't identify with a specific Baptist church, because for years, even though I was raised predominantly Southern Baptist, I would have identified as Baptist without being Southern Baptist or anything along those lines. So considering that we're talking with someone who cannot even put together 2 sentences explaining what mechanism they could possibly use to show the truth of something. I think them not knowing what variety of Baptist, are you free will? Are you independent free will? Are you, Bible Baptist? I don't think that Eli has the capacity right now to think about things in those terms. He just knows that Baptist is something that people say, and since he buys into that particular doctrine, he's going to run with it.
There's definitely a type of charismatic evangelism that, again, it's huge within Mormonism, and I'm sure you can think of some Mormons you've talked to over the years that this will bear out. It is pedantry as a policy. Don't give a direct answer, because then they can start picking the direct answers apart. And I almost wondered if Eli calls back in again and we decide to try again, I think next time it's going to have to be the only way this works is if you agree to always answer yes or no questions, and that's the entire way we're going to do it, with just yes or no questions to the end.
I see the value in it, and there's many times where I hold people's feet to the fire, but I really want to. I get you.
Yeah.
It's like I'd love to give enough air for somebody to answer, but let's try. First of all, I'm going to take a non-theistic caller just because they've been on hold for a long time, and then we'll get on to the next theistic caller right after that. But Arlindo in the UK, pronouns are he/him. Welcome to the Sunday Show.
Oh, hi, Matt and Jimmy. How's it going? You all right?
Hello.
Yeah. What do you got for us?
Hello. Oh, yeah. I'd like to talk about my mum's would-be Muslim boyfriend, if you don't mind. He said some very questionable things.
Yeah.
So, basically, go for it.
I saw in the notes that you wrote, "Can scientists make me a fly?" It's not up at the moment.
Yeah.
It will go back up, but your Muslim apologist is quoting a popular Muslim apologetics video from YouTube. It has that. It has the eyeball stuff. And it's all the exact same. Anybody with a basic understanding of, I don't even think you actually have to have taken a biology course to get the understanding of why that's silly. There's actually some pretty good, I'm trying to remember which book it would have been in, but some of Richard Dawkins' work on evolution and bio is where I learned a lot of the arguments that were more efficient than just trying to explain biology to people. But you should know he is specifically just quoting at least popular Muslim apologetics, so popular that one of the most popular Muslim apologetic videos has the "Can science make a fly?" argument in it.
That doesn't surprise me, because he knows I'm an atheist.
It's also a stupid position for them to take, because eventually, yes, and then are they going to stop? No, they're just going to change. They're going to pretend they never made that apologetic. But why there wouldn't? I mean, in a lot of ways, we've made many flies.
Yeah. Well, my mum's keeping a distance now because he ended up saying some very dodgy things, things that didn't sit well with me and my wife. And, to cut a long story short, he's got some conservative views about male and female roles. And, the guy's supposed to go out there, earn a living, pay for everything. The wife's supposed to stay at home and be submissive. And that's definitely not my mum. She's a very independent woman. He also said, right, that when the world ends, Jewish people will try to hide behind rocks and the rocks will come to life, and say things like, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come and get him. And, when I told him I actually have Jewish in my family, he sort of retracted, his dislike for Jews, and just said, "Oh, everyone's got a story to tell." And, that he goes, "Oh, I actually don't frequent mosques, and, I don't need an imam to tell me how to live my life." But yeah, he says, "Oh, I still believe in God." And I told him, I don't, I'm not convinced. But he said, "You will believe in science when scientists can make a fly." There's no point arguing with him. It's almost like he holds on to those beliefs. And even if I say to him, "Look, there are many things that we we can't do and we don't know, but that doesn't mean that the world was created by God, and it's very difficult to produce, you know.
Did he tell you he'll
yeah,
believe in science when science can make a fly in a room lit by light bulbs while he had a cell phone in his pocket and the air was being circulated by a machine?
That's right. That's
Word.
right. I mean, it's one of those moments where you feel like you want to say more, but, you know, sometimes you have to bite your lip and,
So,
you know.
So, Orlando, what would the question surrounding this be? Just how would we reply to, can science make a fly?
Yeah, that basically, if he were to call you, right, and I know he won't because he's not as brave as me, but if he were to call you and he said to you, you know, basically that's the question. If he said to you, well, can scientists make me a fly? No, they can't. You would say straight away, no, they can't. Therefore,
No, I would say whether science can make a fly does not in any way justify your belief in a God. And that would, I don't care if he believes in science.
So whether science can make a fly right now or ever is irrelevant to anything else. But also his argument seems to be that, only God can make a fly. Well, you haven't proved that God exists or that God can make a fly. You just know that flies exist, and you're coming up with an explanation for it where you say your magic man can do it. And what science tells us is that flies are the product of evolution and change over a long period of time through purely natural processes that are unguided. This is the cornerstone of biology, and it's not about, hey, we're justified in believing in a God until you can prove that science can do X. It is, you're not justified in believing in God, and science has demonstrated X and a good chunk of X. The fact, maybe it's impossible for anybody to manufacture a fly ever from purely scientific standpoints, but that is completely irrelevant to whether or not there's a God.
Oh, by the way,
you know, if he's like, show me science making a fly, show me God making a fly. There.
Yeah, exactly. He actually said that scientists actively pretend to be atheists, otherwise their careers would be over. And when he said that, I didn't have time to go very much into it, but I should have told him about Francis Crick, because I'm pretty sure Francis Crick is
one of the largest scientific institutions in the world operates out of the Vatican and under the Vatican's funding. And I mean, it's literally like so many advancements in cosmology and biology have happened in Vatican labs. Sir Francis Collins is one of the most famous scientists in the world.
No, not Sir Francis Collins.
Just Francis Collins. I don't know why I always do that. It's in my head though. Francis Collins.
Maybe you're confusing with Sir Francis Drake.
Could be.
Yeah.
Arlindo, I have a suggestion.
Sir Francis Drake. Yeah.
Have him call us.
Yeah, I would love him if he called, but I don't think he actually knows I've been calling you guys, and I did explain to him, look, I've sometimes called this show about atheism versus theism, and he said to me, "Oh, you're braver than me. I'd never do that." But I would really love it if you did.
Can you give me his first name? Is that okay?
Seeing him. Yeah, Kamal.
Kamal.
He's from Turkey.
Kamal, if you call to defend that your God exists, you will fail. I'm calling you out right now. You will not be able to defend with good reason that your God exists. And if you can, you better call. But I'm telling you, you can't.
Yeah, I think he would piss you off because he's also homophobic. We were actually watching a British soap called.
It'd be a weird thing for him to bring up when he's defending that God exists, though.
Yeah. And basically, we were watching a scene where one of the characters, who happens to be gay, was reacting badly to a situation. And, you know, it's like, it's obvious that it doesn't matter, you know, it's got nothing to do with your sexual orientation, whether someone reacts badly or not. But anyway, this character was reacting badly to a situation, and he made a homophobic comment, you know, along the lines of, well, he's a faggot anyway. And my wife pulled that bullshit out straight away. She said, there's nothing wrong with being gay. And then...
Hey, Arlindo, just so you know, as a matter of courtesy, even if you are yourself queer, we don't say the slurs on air on a channel that's trying to main monetization.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I'm just basically using the word he used, but yeah.
You can just say F slur next time.
Yeah, yeah. No problem. Yeah, you said the F word. Yeah, and I'm so sorry about that. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, it didn't sit well with my wife. I mean, it is a slur. And
maybe it shouldn't have sat well with you, and then you wouldn't have been so casual with it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Arlindo,
I tend to be.
Arlindo, last moments, just because we do have some Thea's call we want to jump onto.
Thea's too.
Yep.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, that's basically it, really. I just wanted you guys to say something that he might hear, seeing as he got that stuff off of YouTube. And he said so many things. He's also said that, by the way, I'm going to leave you. He said that Noah's Ark was found in Mount Ararat in his home country, Turkey, because there's something spiritual going on around Turkey.
Have him call, because I'm very familiar with that claim as well. So Kamal, the final thought here is Kamal, I'm Kamaling you out. I'm hilarious.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Arlen.
That is a good one. No problem. Take care, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Cheers. All right.
Hey,
why don't we get some announcements out before we take this next theistic caller? I know we have lots and lots of shows on this network, and Jimmy knows who's going to be on them.
Let's start with this. We missed the goal to get you that cat tattoo, right?
Yeah,
we are currently at 485 patrons. Now, we need our Patreon, our patronage to expand. There was some slowdown in a lot of ways back from the hack and stuff happening, but we have these big goals for the next year. We've shifted the priority. Originally, it was going to be to try and get some sort of production facility, hopefully community center next, and then be able to start planning LineCon. I want LineCon 2024 to happen very much, and a big part of that is going to be whether or not we can have certain things paid for in advance and stuff. So Patreon funding, as well as we're going to be expanding with new content exclusively for patrons. So one of them will be at 1,000 patrons. When we double it, Matt and I are going to begin a series. It won't always be Matt and I, but the first series is going to be or the first episode of the series will be an episode exclusively only for patrons of Matt and I watching God's Not Dead. And then after that, we will do other movies with other atheists, but that's going to be a terrible time for both of us. Matt's seen the movie before. I've never seen the whole thing, just clips. In fact, funny enough, the first video I ever released on YouTube was me responding to an argument that had been being popularized by the resurgence of that movie. And so I did quote it. But that's coming up. But Matt, before 1,000 patrons, what patron number, or do you want to make it 1,000 also? What patron number between now, 485 and 1,000, would make it so you do indeed get, and I actually have it ready again, this tattooed on your body? Do you want to pick a number and commit to it?
We're at what now?
485. And let's say that we need a date as well. So we'd give it 2 weeks by the 23rd, because today is the 9th. If we are at what number gets this tattoo on your body? Drawn by Seth Andrews.
Not tattooed by him, but yeah. So if we're at 485 now,
485, yeah.
485 now, so 115 more would get you to 600, but that would barely cover the cost of the tattoo, even if all those people joined and left from 700.
All right. So if we hit 700 patrons by 2 weeks from today, 700 by the 20.
Let's close out the month. Let's make it August 1st.
Okay, by
Unless
August 1st.
Unless you've got a reason.
Just to make it faster. I really want to start being able to plan LineCon was the only thing. But
3 weeks is the 30th, and we'll be here on a Sunday show anyway. Cool. So 700 by then.
Cool. By July 30th, 700 by then. And then, if you also want that watching terrible Christian movies theater series exclusively for patrons, that's the other way. And patronage does start at just $5 a month. So patreon.com/calltheline. You can always find that in the description. And then there's a little graphic at the end. As for the upcoming week, Man, I'm amazed that you probably keep hearing me get word confused, and that's just from being sick and exhausted. But for the coming week, tomorrow, Shannon Q will be joined by Paula Gia on Skeptalk at the normal 6 o'clock time. That is 6 o'clock Central. Dave Warnock will be joined by Forrest Valkai on Tuesday for Dying Out Loud, talking about your purpose without religion, facing your mortality without religion, those sorts of themes from two amazing people. Matt will be joined by TBD, or more TBA. I know who they're talking to about getting this Wednesday, but we're not ready to confirm and announce it yet. And then the original Dream Team, Katy Montgomerie and Arden Hart, will be back on the Transatlantic Call-In Show this Thursday. You got anything you want to add on to that?
No. Oh my gosh, we lost Wes.
Oh, Wes, call back.
Wes was calling in to explain why he believes in God and proves his existence. You were literally the next call after the announcements, and then Wes is gone. But we got another theist, so I guess Boris in Texas gets to be next up. Pronouns are he, him. Welcome, Boris. You're on the Sunday show with Matt and Jimmy.
Hello, Matt and Jimmy. How y'all doing?
Just fine.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Sure can. Yep.
Oh, yeah, how y'all doing? I'm going to go ahead and just go through this quickly so I won't take up too much time. I actually have a question for both of y'all because I couldn't really figure out how to answer this. I was having a conversation with another friend who is for some reason, he's an atheist, but for some reason he doesn't accept, he said he's not, he doesn't say he's not one, he just says that he accepts the ideas of Christianity because he realizes that if you're a human, you have a need to worship, and you're going to worship something and follow something. I must mention that this friend of mine has also went down this Andrew Tate rabbit hole of ultra masculinity, and you already know the whole Jordan Peterson, all these Matt Walsh types of people, that really annoying rabbit hole. And I was arguing with him saying, well, no, I don't worship anything myself. So if I don't have to worship something, I don't see why another human has to worship anything. Sure, we have a need for tragic ideas to, whether it's in sports or religion, but to actually need to worship something is not needed. I need a quote that he does, again, I know he's an atheist, but he won't admit it anymore for whatever reason. He won't even say that he believes in God. So I don't know. My question is, do humans really need to worship something, or is that just something that just comes along with society?
I'm so sorry. I thought we were getting a call from another theist, but we're not. So my apologies for.
I'm sorry.
So
I'm sorry,
the question is.
Back?
No. The question you're asking is, do we think people need to worship something? I think some people may have some need along those lines, but not all of us. And I think it's a need that's cultivated. We all have fears, and we all would like to have, we have a discomfort with not having answers. And so religions pretend to offer answer, and that's appealing to people.
I guess I would have asked your friend, Skylar, Boris, did your friend define worship for you, by the way?
Actually, yes, he did. He's, I'm not trying to repeat more or less how he said it, but he's saying that, or the way he put it, again, he's on this really weird rabbit hole. So he's saying that, or if you're religious or you're an atheist, you all have a propaganda you're going to follow. We all follow propaganda. You claim to be agnostic, atheist, or atheist, you also follow propaganda. You just follow what he said. You follow woke. You follow equality and all these other dog whistle words. That
the number of atheists who are not woke or follow quote unquote equality is. But what was the definition of worship he gave, though? Not whatever this was.
Like I said, I believe he's trying to say that our idea of worship is to follow something because if it gives us life. So for us to work as a society, we have the need to worship. We're going to worship something.
Right.
If we don't worship something,
what does the word
we
worship mean, Boris? Boris, just the word worship. Did he say worship means?
To me,
if he didn't say it, it's fine. I'm going to tell you next time you have this conversation, you need to have him define terms because he's using them loosely and ridiculously, just buzzwords that, as you mentioned, probably came out of the mouth of Jordan Peterson, probably came out of the mouth of Andrew Tate, because the word worship, I'm just pulling up the Google definition, and this is basic, almost word for word what I would have said. The word worship means the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration for a deity. Now, you could say that we colloquially sometimes remove deity and put a person in the place. So, in a lot of ways, Mormons absolutely do worship Joseph Smith, but not as a deity, though kind of also, yes. But so you could say colloquially, it's just the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration, but for some heightened supernatural sort of thing. Sort of spiritual concept. And then even propaganda is information which is deceptive when you're trying to deceive a person into believing something by popularizing that information in a way that is also deceptive. And it sounds like he's just throwing out these buzzwords and you aren't engaged when you were talking about the back and forth. I'm not trying to be rude, but it doesn't sound like you were actually engaging. The argument you were having wasn't engaging as though those terms were defined correctly.
You're right. You're right. I didn't ask.
Boris, you cut out right after I didn't ask. Are you still there? Boris!
I didn't ask to define it. Yes, I'm right here.
Okay, there we go. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm right here.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yes, I didn't ask him any definitions. I took what he said as face value, assuming when we talked that humans have this need to worship because of our animal instincts. That's what I took it as. I didn't ask him for any definition, so that was my fault on my end.
And even there, so immediately I would go, what animals? What do you see other animals worship? If it's a quality of being an animal and our instincts, what do you? Literally, like, if you just start asking people to defend the words they're using, a lot of these things end up falling apart. Can I have your friend's first name, Boris?
I'd rather ask him first. I'd rather, like...
What about a nickname?
Like, talk to him about... I don't want to just give people name out, like...
just give me...
I'd rather have his permission first. I don't want to just give a name out.
Okay, let's just agree that in the next sentence, your friend is going to be referred to as Tommy. All right, you and I were just going to agree with that.
Okay.
And so Tommy is the representative. I'm just going to do what I did with Arlindo. Tommy, Boris's friend, I'm calling you out. Not all humans need to worship, and it's not even demonstrated that any human needs to worship. As an atheist, I don't worship anything. As an atheist and a skeptic, I don't think Matt claims to worship anything, except maybe
pretty
dead
much
ass.
despise the concept of worship.
Yep. There we go. And we are calling you out. And if you disagree, we're telling the entire world that Tommy, who represents Boris's friend, whose first name Boris was very overly kind to not offer, we're calling you out as wrong in front of the whole world. But you can call into us and tell us we're wrong and why. And if you are correct and you can actually meet the standards of skepticism, we will give you the show. It's yours from then on. Boris, does that work for you?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. He did say also one other thing.
Go ahead.
And I'm sure you've answered this before. I just don't remember. He also did say that atheism.
You cut off right before the juicy part. Is your phone powering off or something, like going into sleep mode? Or are you muting the phone with your face? Make sure that you're keeping the phone active and the browser open.
Yes. Okay. There you go.
Cool. What was the thing? What was the other thing he said?
He did. Atheists cannot escape religion. Now,
so far,
the way he explained it to me was the way he explained it was we're pretty much all going to be convinced some way or another, and that religion is inside of us in one way or another. I didn't ask him to define that either.
Right,
so
Boris, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Answered this question.
I can defend that atheists can't escape religion in the current present world. I certainly can't. But what he was saying, I can't defend.
No, this is what he's doing is, sorry, there's no nice way to say it. He's explaining how weak his mind is.
Yeah.
He feels that, oh, you just can't avoid this, and not in the sense of you're in a society where religion permeates and potentially poisons everything. He means that it's unavoidable in reality, that you're going to have to worship something. You're going to have to buy into one of these claims at some point, that is inevitable. And he's just wrong, and sadly wrong.
I agree with you 100%. The rabbit hole he's going down, I've on any other conversation I've ever had, I've always said, if you need somebody to hold your hand to be a man, I got some really bad news for you. So in this case, for him about religion, it's the same thing. If you need something to hang on to because somebody said something else, then, I mean, tough shit, I guess.
Might I suggest, because of the two of us to suggest this, it's slightly sweeter for me to do so, that you have him watch, since he likes Jordan Peterson so much, the Jordan Peterson-Matt Dillahunty debate, where Jordan Peterson sat across from Matt and basically told Matt the same things that this guy said, and got his ass handed to him about, well, atheists might not believe in God, but they act like they believe in God. Yeah. It's, give it a go.
Yeah, I've seen it. It was
Only
very
clarification.
Yes, it was
Only
very
clarification. Never mind.
Hello?
I was just going to say that it wasn't a debate.
I'm sorry?
Apart from that.
Right. Sure. There were multiple topics which came to debate, like whatever. Anything else before we let you go, Boris?
No.
Cool. Thank you.
No, thank y'all for hearing me out. I'll go ahead and hang up on y'all first so you can get to the next caller. Thank you very much.
See you, Boris.
There you go. Well, I'm kind of disappointed. I mean,
yeah.
In everyone and everything, just general disappointment. We had Wes, by the way. Wes is the individual who called to ask what our thoughts were on open theism, who then tried to pretend that I was taking the Bible out of context or didn't understand the context while he was arguing for the potential of open theism. I thought Wes was calling back in because it says here he wants to explain why he believes in God and prove his existence. And that'd be wonderful. Like, I get excited every time I see a theist not only wants to call in and explain why they believe, but thinks they can demonstrate it. Because one of these days, somebody's going to present some new and novel argument backed up by some sort of evidence that I can't debunk while drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm constantly hoping that it's going to happen on one of these shows where I'm not going to instantly see. One of the biggest problems is, and this is absolutely, somebody can clip this out. This is absolutely me just blowing myself. I've done this for almost 20 years, and I spot where they're going before they know where they're going, and spot the fallacies before they're incapable of spotting the fallacies. There's not a single argument for the existence of God that isn't just some sort of new twist on something I've dealt with 1,000 times. And that means that sometimes I'm going to be awful at this because I see it before the people watching the show see it. And so it seems like, oh, Matt just hastily shut it down. And so what I'm trying to do, and what I tried to do today with Ash and others, I want to give them more space. I want to give them more rope. I want to let them make their case. I'm trying to do a better job of just taking notes so that I can say, a minute ago, here's exactly what you said, and here's why this is incorrect or why this is fallacious. And I was really hoping that Wes had, gone off with, especially since I read Wes the Riot Act at the end of that call. I just fucking lit into him. So I was really happy to see that Wes had the and the stones or whatever. Stones isn't the right way. And the guts to call back in. And I couldn't wait to hear what Wes had to say, but Wes hung up. And now we have unfortunately run out of theistic callers. So we've got some atheists we can talk to for now. But seriously, if you're watching this and went to church today, I still want to know why you went, why you think anybody else should go. What did you get out of it? What message was there? Because I haven't been in a while. And here you have two lost souls living in a fishbowl, to do the Pink Floyd line. If you're a Christian in particular, you're under the Great Commission, as is in the fraudulent part of Mark 16, 9 through 20, those verses that don't exist in the oldest manuscripts that involved you shall know them by them being able to drink poison and not die and handle snakes and stuff. But it also includes one version of the Great Commission to tell everybody, to spread the good news. You're under an obligation under 1 Peter 3:15 to be prepared at all times to give a reason for the faith that's within you. And that's why we're here. We are literally, if you are able to speak in coherent sentences,
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to find a better platform on the planet for you to potentially be able to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to present the evidence for it. We're not just going to let you come in and preach a sermon, but if you can handle answering questions, if you can handle being challenged, if you can manage to stay on topic, if you can put together a valid syllogism, even if it's unsound, you're going to get massive amount of airtime, more than you'd get on like your average Christian call-in show where you're preaching to the choir. This is your chance. This is your chance to say, hey, here's what's convinced me. Here's why I think it's important. Here's why, I think you guys are just buying into woke propaganda, which is one of the dumbest lines ever, since if anything, we're the ones shoveling the propaganda. Don't pretend that we bought into it. I'm fucking selling it, and it ain't propaganda. It's called humanism. But,
yeah. As we take this next call, I'm going to step away for a minute. The Jordan Peterson impression actually made me much more nauseous when you do something that far back in your throat. So I'm going to step away and let you take Skylar for a bit.
Absolutely. And please, your Jordan Peterson impression is outstanding, as you well know.
It's not as good as my Trump, but I appreciate it.
Skylar in New York, pronouns are he, him. Welcome to the show. You're on with me because Jimmy's running away.
Hey, Matt. How are you today?
I'm doing better than Jimmy.
You're doing better than Jimmy? That was actually a good Jordan Peterson impression. I was laughing when I was hearing that.
Yeah, he does great. He does great. What do you got?
I do apologize in advance. I do have a slight stutter, and I get a little nervous at times. So I do apologize. Bear with me. Sure. I won't take up too much of your time. But just to give you a little bit of context, as the screen caller shows you, I am an atheist. However, I'm still relatively untrained on how to respond to some of the most strong, that's not coherent, the strongest apologetics. Sure. For example, I graduated from a Christian college. I went to this small college in Western New York called Houghton University. And it was about 2 years ago that I became an atheist. And one of my professors at the alma mater found out that I'm an atheist. And he's actually a good friend. He's only probably like a decade older than me. And we've played a lot of board games together. And we've had a few calls back and forth over the last 4 to 5 months. And obviously, he's trained in philosophy. He holds a PhD in philosophy. And I've been trying to engage with him, but it can be a little challenging at times. I wanted to ask you a couple questions because him and I, we've covered the main arguments that, you've probably been talking repeatedly about for 20 years, as you were talking about, like the cosmological, the teleological morality argument. And one of the things that he said that I need to do in order to possibly come back to the faith is I need to lower my epistemic standard of proof. And I wonder how you would respond to that. And my second question is, what do you think of the Euthyphro dilemma, and does that defeat the argument for morality, or from morality? Sorry.
So, if somebody were to say to me, "You need to lower your epistemic," what was it? What was it? Standard of evidence?
Yeah. Yep.
So you need to lower your epistemic standard of evidence. Why can't God raise his ability to provide good evidence? I mean, if God exists,
that's fair
it
point.
must be the single most important fact that any of us could know or would need to know. And yet you're asking me to accept it on lower standards of evidence than I would use for other claims. Now, how does that make any sense at all? Isn't that merely an admission that the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-wise creator of the universe has somehow managed to fail to meet even the basic standards of evidence that we would expect for, hey, I just got a new car?
Right. I sort of responded with something like that, and his response was to say, well, in other facets of life, I don't use this high standard of evidence, which I think is just a cop-out from him. For example, he brought up beliefs about morality, right? And I would tell him, well, I just assume that of the principle of well-being, right? And I use your analogy of the chess game, right? You just assume it, but once you assume human well-being as a principle, then you can objectively measure actions that advance or hinder human well-being, human flourishing. And he wanted to critique that assumption, and that's when I brought up the Euthyphro dilemma, because he wanted to talk about morality and how my standard of evidence for my humanistic worldview is lower than the standard of evidence that I am demanding from the theist. And that's when I brought up the Euthyphro dilemma, telling him, well, at the end of the day, you know, as what was his name? G.K. Chesterton once said, or I might be butchering the quote, there's a thought that ends all thought. Like, at the end of the day, you have to rely on unjustified axioms. And I said to him, you as a theist as well have to rest your assumptions on morality on some sort of divine command theory. And it gets really frustrating because he's a philosophy professor and he throws out all of these terminology, and he called me a logical positivist, which I don't even know what that means. And yeah, I'm just having a hard time engaging with him.
Well, you might. So first of all, you might have some views that are consistent with logical positivism. You could go on Wikipedia and find out and look it up. I have some areas where I agree generally with logical positivists, but not for that reason. And logical positivism has its issues. But I find that when somebody wants to, I don't fit with labels. And so if somebody wants to label you or find out what label you put on yourself, if you're willing to put a label on yourself, then you should probably understand it a bit. I frequently identify as a humanist, but also as a humist, as in I'm generally in agreement with David Hume on epistemology. But when it comes to, other philosophical views, I find that when somebody does that and say, oh, you're a logical positivist, it's much like what I used to do ages ago on other shows, which was I would just say, oh, your logical fallacy is this. All that is, it's not necessarily intended that way, but it's a way of saying, I understand this and you don't, and that's why you just committed this fallacy that I labeled without actually describing the fallacy. And so my ex-wife called me out on it, and she's like, don't say argument from ignorance because they think you're calling them stupid. And instead of naming the fallacy, tell them what the fallacy is and work towards, explaining why it's fallacious, because they may have an understanding of it without the jargon. And what your professor friendy or PhD philosophy Yahoo, they're doing that. They're not bothering to explain, and they're just dismissing. It's let me put you in a bucket and be done with it. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I'm working to do it less and less. But when we're talking about the second they say that you need to lower your standards of evidence in order to accept the most important claim ever, they've betrayed that they don't understand skepticism, and they don't understand the value of epistemology, the value of having good reasons for belief. Because if you lower your standards of evidence for claims of that nature, not just the Jesus claims that they happen to accept, but in order to be intellectually rigorous and honest, you would have to lower your standards for all of the supernatural claims that are like that. You have to say, for this category of claims, I need to have a really low standard of evidence. And what you would end up doing is you would be forced to accept multiple competing religious claims, multiple competing supernatural claims that are mutually exclusive and cannot both be true. And when you have to do that, then yeah, of course, the mere fact that he could utter this notion that you need to lower your standards of evidence in order to accept this claim, that's what con men do. That's what gullibility is. That's what it means to accept something frivolously. It is, why would the most important claim in the world, why would the existence of a God or an afterlife or any of these things require a standard of evidence that, would convince you of anything? What things could you not believe on the new lowered standard of evidence? That's the question to ask. If I adopt this new standard of evidence, please point to religious and supernatural claims that I could not believe.
Sure.
Now,
Yeah,
on the
our next phone call, I will definitely bring up these points.
I
think what he was. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you asked about the Euthyphro thing, and I want to make sure you got an answer to it, because I realized I just kind of buzzed by it. It is, the Euthyphro dilemma is it was never intended to be a thing about God so much as it was about piety itself. But it works in the sense of, we have a dilemma about the nature of a specific God, but there are problems with the Euthyphro dilemma in that it may not match with what someone's particular definition of a God is. Maybe God is not, in fact, all good, or maybe God's understanding of all good is sufficiently different from ours. And so we're injecting our perception of what is egregious evil and other things like that. And so if you just, as many theists would do, accept from the get-go that God's understanding of morality is necessarily vastly superior to ours, then you can dismiss everything, including the Euthyphro dilemma, which I like. You can dismiss even the Euthyphro dilemma by saying, yes, but it's predicated on a human understanding of suffering or immorality or, that sort of thing. And God knows and sees further. And so then the only thing that you can do is point out that, well, at that point, all you can say is that you have no way of demonstrating that this God exists and knows morality better. You're just asserting that that is the case. And so if all you're going to do is assert that God exists, that he is necessarily good, and that he knows these and understands these things so much better than we do, that it's our flawed misunderstanding that leads us to that, then the next question is, okay, why is God incapable of making us understand this foundational issue? Because it would be like they're trying to say God is the creator of The Sims, but he can't communicate with them in any way where they understand this.
Right. I think the one response that he brought up, which doesn't make sense to me. I wanted to see if you think what I said is a good response. Essentially, he says that how would he describe it? That these moral principles are sort of like there is a perfect good, in that I am borrowing as an atheist, that I'm borrowing from a Christian worldview.
Yeah,
and
I recognize this one.
That's absolute nonsense. So I direct him. Well, this is going to be self-serving, but I would direct him to my lecture on the superiority of secular morality, because there's not a single objection to a secular moral system that is in any way solved by appealing to a God. You are making these claims about a perfect good, but you're not able to demonstrate them. And I'm not borrowing from a perfect good in the construction of my moral system, because my moral system begins with a few very simple foundational assumptions, and that are that health is generally preferable to sickness, that peace is preferable to suffering, that avoiding harm is generally preferable to instilling harm. And when these principles come in conflict with each other, you can evaluate them to say, maybe my life can become so bad that life is no longer generally preferable, or it may still be generally preferable to death, but in some circumstances, death may actually be preferable to life. And so the complexities of evaluating the overlap between these foundational principles is where everything of substance is in morality. I don't have to borrow anything. I can just begin with a couple of simple assumptions. And the one foundational assumption for all of it is that morality is about the well-being of thinking creatures, to borrow a phrase from Sam Harris that I was using in a slightly different sense before I had that language of well-being of thinking creatures. If that's what it's about, then secular morality has as its goal the goal of getting better at getting better. And so if you have evidence that shows a particular moral value is in conflict with well-being, then we've made a mistake. And secular moral systems can correct for that mistake by changing everything right down to life is generally preferable to death. Maybe we got that wrong. And you can do some thought experiments and say, okay, if we begin with death is generally preferable to life, what sort of world does that result in? Well, it results in a lot of death, which seems to be in conflict with well-being. And so that's all it takes. When they want to say, oh, you have to borrow from a worldview or a Christian worldview, no, you're just asserting that there is a magic perfection which may not exist, which may not even be possible to exist. I'm not pointing to perfection. I'm not pointing to an ideal. I'm not an idealist at all. I don't need a perfection. Perfect is the enemy of the good. All I need is a goal that is perhaps unachievable immediately. And from that, one thing that Sam Harris got incredibly right in The Moral Landscape is that each of the moral peaks that you rise to allow you to see farther into the landscape to identify which moral peaks are potentially higher. And even though you may have to travel through a valley to get to that next moral peak, you were able to spot that peak only because you crawled out of a valley to some peak before that. We don't need an idealized perfect mountaintop in the landscape. All we need is relative comparisons so that we can see this model is better than that model.
Hey, Skylar.
And lastly, when you push back on all this, how does appealing to a God solve any problem or any objection that he has with secular morality? Because in all the years that I've done this, nobody's come up with any objection that is in any way solved by appealing to God, because they can't demonstrate the God. So it might as well be saying, hey, my buddy's best friend Joe said this, and Joe's perfect. Okay, prove it.
Hey, Skylar.
Right. And that's the beauty of secular morality is, like, as you were describing, it's something that is progressive in nature. If there's an error, you can fix it. Whereas a religious moral framework, it's unchanging, and it's that's the flaw with that. Sorry, you were about to say something, Jimmy?
I was going to ask if I could have a nickname or first name for your teacher.
John.
Hey, John, your assertions about secular morality are nonsense, and the concept that extraordinary claims require a lower standard of evidence is misguided at best and a malicious scam at worst. Worse. And even though I can't apparently figure out worse versus worst, and you are a philosophy teacher, you can call myself and Matt and defend your position here on the line, because we, John, are calling you the fuck out.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to get him to call into the show. I want to see Matt tear apart his arguments, because he dresses up his arguments in a lot of rhetoric and terminology that I'm not familiar with, and that's where I get lost sometimes.
This is the main reason why, and people give me shit for it when I say I have so little interest in participating in conversations that are billed as philosophy conversations, because it is a lot of self-aggrandizing, fart smelling, and just the metaphysical substrate and the sublation of philosophical slow boys like myself quoting two different pedantic assholes that at the same time, that from recent memory, Craig and Jordan.
Right.
Yep.
Before you let me go, could I ask a follow-up question to the Euthyphro dilemma?
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of our tangent conversations that we were having with the Euthyphro dilemma, and I want to see if you agree with me on this, is his response sort of like the same logical framework that open theists will use with regards to God's foreknowledge, is that with morality, he will argue that God is incapable of commanding evils to be good, which I brought up to him that I said, well, if morality is ultimately what God says, then there could have been a world where the moral laws and decrees that he has set out would have been, he could have made them differently. And that's the problem that I have with a religious take on morality, is that ultimately it's a divine command. And his response is that, well, God is incapable, sort of like the logic that open theists will use with God's foreknowledge, is that God is incapable of instructing evil to be good. And I said to him, well, even if I grant your premise here, your argument that God is incapable, which doesn't prove that God exists, is what I said to him, that even if I grant your argument, that ultimately it doesn't show that God is necessary for objective morality to exist. Because you can say that even if God, his nature is perfectly moral, that doesn't mean that you cannot arrive to objective morality without invoking a God, because you can. That might mean that God, his nature is perfectly good, but that doesn't mean that he's needed for objective morality.
Yeah, you could have, well, if it's possible to have an objectively perfect being, the existence of that perfect being isn't necessarily a required foundation for morality. Because morality, it may be the case that morality can't be perfect, that the fundamental nature of reality is such that you could never have a perfect morality, and that all of it, because my view of morality is it's all situational. And since each situation is unique, there may be a perfect answer for that unique situation, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to identify it. But also, yeah, the existence of a being that is perfect is kind of secondary to whether or not there's a perfect answer to this. Just like there's an answer to a particularly difficult equation, whether or not there's anyone who is smart enough to calculate it. Like if God was the absolutely perfect in thought, being able to, I don't know, mathematicians don't email me, but being able to intuitively know or correctly know, how to solve this paradox or that equation or whatever else, the existence of that person is independent from whether or not whatever the answer is to it. Yes.
Right.
As you were describing, though, your frustration with these discussions on morality, I have similar frustrations with the discussions on morality. One, the concept of it being from God, therefore makes it objective as opposed to others, when in reality, the defense of its being objective is that it's dictated. And in the real world, when a dictator issues laws, we don't call them objective laws, we call them authoritarian. And the subjectivity of God's will seems to be as subjective as anybody else's will. Kind of like, as you were pointing out, if God had wanted to make murdering babies moral, he just had to say that was what was moral, without any justification. And so it's almost bragging about, we have unjustified, dictated morality that we're going to call objective. And I've never heard a compelling argument to actually grant them that, any more so than you could say that you are either objectively or not. You are objectively either adhering or not adhering to X moral system versus any other. But then also, at its absolute core, the idea of figuring out what is moral is such an obviously human practice. The concept of how should I treat other people? And you can see by our failures that we've really been trying to figure that out for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, despite the fact that the supposed objective source exists, and yet even the objective source's laws are being so commonly changed. And so the idea that the starting point should be taking the word for the people who claim to speak for that objective person as being accurate, versus if I was just trying to start a moral system, create a moral system of how should I treat other people, the first most reasonable question is, well, how do I want to be treated? And then secular humanism even gets better, improves that, because it becomes, how would I want to be treated if instead of the person I am born as, I was born as somebody else? The whole thing is, again, a bit self-sublating. Funny.
Right.
It's a funny
Even
joke I just said.
If you grant their premise, it's ultimately subjective on God's whim, so it's not really an objective morality.
Again,
either.
It's more of unjustified dictation is what they're bragging is objective.
Right.
Well
I think
done.
your comparison to authoritarianism that's pretty apt.
Maybe. Sometimes I'm just spitballing, and then Matt will point out after the show, like, just so you know, this is why you should never say that again. No, he doesn't do it that way.
No,
he's always super nice.
So far, I think you're on it.
Thanks. I hope I remember what I said tomorrow, because, boy, I feel like shit. And Aron just told me that a bunch of people can't come to the Book of Mormon reading today, so I'm going to try to go, even though I feel like shit. But no guarantees I'll be there the whole show, everybody. Anyway, Skylar, anything else before we move on here?
I think that's it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Bye.
See ya. I'm waiting a second to see what the screener's just picked up a call that's come from the same area code as Wes, but a different number. And I just want to see if that turns out to be Wes before we
that'd be cool.
Necessarily jump straight to the next one, unless one of these two looks like we could hit them real fast. Which number did I have? Yep, number 3. Let's see. So this one, let's just hit this quick, because I don't think it's a question. I think it's just this comment. Jamie in New Mexico, are you essentially calling to, sort of in opposition to the caller earlier, say actually being confronted with a heightened level of not necessarily respectful engagement actually helped me see past my religious beliefs, that it actually was the right method of appealing to your sort of mind?
That is precisely exactly what I'm calling about, Jimmy.
Awesome. Is there anything you want to add on top of that? Because generally we don't really let callers just call in to sort of monologue, but if you've got a question or something you want to hear Matt and I give some comments on, certainly you can present that.
You know, I want to throw an idea out, because I was very involved with church in a lot of ways. I was a on the worship team for a long time and involved with ministries. And there's a thing about being in any kind of cult that you feel like you have special information. And I think that's one of the things that's seductive and persuasive to people. And it's also what feeds their arrogance and any tendency toward narcissism. So if you want to talk about that kind of thing, but no, yeah, I realize that you guys don't. But thank you to Matt, and you guys have helped me a lot in these past couple of years with clarifying some things, because it's been an interesting journey.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
And yeah, awesome. You guys have a great day. Thanks for taking the call.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
go fuck
Jamie.
yourself.
And thanks for being
Bye.
the almost perfect short call to fill in between, but the screening is not yet complete, so we're still waiting on that other one. This other call we've got lining up. I really just want to know if it's just Wes in there or not. It taking this long kind of makes me think not. So it's just an area code coincidence. However, it is a theist with a 3-letter name also. This is very interesting. We're talking to Jay in Illinois. Now, Jay, are you in any way related to Wes? Has Wes asked you to call? Are you friends or family? Or is the fact that you have the same area code and both have a 3-letter name an entire coincidence?
I have no knowledge of him.
Oh, all right. All right. Well, go ahead, Jay. You want to prove that God exists. You're on the line with Jimmy and Matt.
Yes. God is, he's basically telling us he exists. He's speaking to us.
And how does he do that?
Every day. Through his word.
Through his word?
What's his word, and how do you know it's his word?
Because it's from him.
Okay. First of all, the first part of the question was, what is his word? But when I say, how do you know that? And you just say it's from him. I guess I need to know how you know that.
Because he's telling us that it's from him. He's speaking to us.
Hang on. So what is his word? Are you talking about the Bible, and which Bible?
Yeah, the Bible, yes, that's his word also.
Also, okay, what's his other word? Like the Book of Mormon?
His son.
Okay, but not the Book of Mormon?
No.
Okay, what about the Quran?
No.
Okay, so some version of the Christian Bible, the 66 books that we know, is the Word of God, and you're saying that you know this because it's from him, but how do you know it's from him?
He's telling us it's from him.
Okay. How is he telling us it's from him? Why are you laughing?
With his words.
No, Jay, hang on. Jay, I don't understand, because I've been doing this from one side or the other since I was 5, and this stuff is important, and I'm asking legitimate questions to try to understand what it is that you're claiming, and then you're laughing. But when you finally say something beyond laughing, you just say nothing. You say, because it's his word. My question is, and should be really simple. I have a Bible right here. As a matter of fact, I have bunches of them. How can I tell that this book, or this collection of 66 books, is in fact from God?
He's telling us in the book.
Okay.
From the book.
Okay.
From his book.
Jay. No, Jay. I'm God. Jay.
From his book.
Jay, I am God. Do you agree or disagree?
Well.
Nope. Agree or disagree? Jay, I am God, the Almighty.
You're not God.
Okay, I'm telling you I am.
You're lying.
Okay, I'm not lying, and I have this document here. I don't know if you can see it on air. I'll try and zoom in so everybody can see it. I have this document here that says I am God, and it's signed by God, and I'm telling you that I am God, and I've got the signature of God, which is my signature to prove it. Okay? So, do you agree or disagree?
You're lying.
Okay, the Bible is lying. How do I know? I'm now just going to say back to you that the Bible is lying because you haven't offered proof that I'm lying. So I'm going to tell you that actually I'm telling the truth and the Bible is lying. So how do we determine whether or not I'm lying or the Bible is lying?
The Bible is telling the truth.
How do you know?
Because it's a witness to the truth.
Okay, this document is the witness to the truth that I am God. So either I'm lying, the Bible's lying, or we're both lying is also an option. So I'm just going to, everything you say, every way you say you are proving that God exists and the Bible is true, so far makes me the Almighty God if I use the exact same burden of proof, level of proof you do. So I'm God. According to your proof, I've adequately proven it. So do you want to come up with a different way to prove that God exists that doesn't include me being God with the exact same level of evidence?
Well, you're not proving that you are God.
Well, you didn't prove that the Bible.
You're not proving the Bible's from God.
Right.
Well, I mean,
here we go. Jay,
he's in there.
Let me try something.
Right?
No, I don't know God is in there. That's why we're asking you the question. See, I used to believe
his name. You know his name.
Do I know whose name? I know whose names are in the Bible. I don't know that it's God.
Jimmy Snow.
Yahweh, Elohim, Adonai, Christ. I know all of them. I was a fucking Christian for nearly 30 years. I have more knowledge and understanding of this stuff than any Christian you've probably ever sat next to in church, including you. I'm asking, how do we know that the book you're pointing to is from God and you are giving me absolutely nothing?
It's his book.
How do we know?
He's telling us.
This is God's
How
legal
is he telling
pad.
us?
Present tense. Present tense.
How is he telling us? How is he telling us?
In his word. He's speaking
What is it?
From
Jay, English motherfucker, do you speak it? Do you understand the words that I'm saying to you?
He does not.
What method can I use to understand that what is written in the Bible is in fact from the one and only true God of the universe? How do I tell that?
You listen.
I have listened. I've listened. I've taught it. I've preached it. Everything. I'm asking. No, sir. You need to provide a mechanism of proof, because right now all you're doing is making one assertion after another, and it's embarrassing. How can we tell that the Bible is from God?
Listen to his
You
word.
need to listen, and then you need to think, and then you need to answer. How can I tell that the Bible is from God? This is the last time I'm asking you, Jay. Give me a method. Give me some proof.
Listen to them.
Goodbye. I don't understand how you're an embarrassment to Christianity, Jay.
Yeah.
I was a better Christian than you when I was a Christian, and I'm a better Christian than you now while I'm an atheist, because I understand how to actually make an argument. I don't just say, you got to read it, you got to learn the words. Jay, there's a way to demonstrate, because you do realize that there are other books out there that you don't think are from God. If I hold up the Book of Mormon, you don't think it's from God, but the Bible you do. And so there must be something different. And if what you're saying is that you just read it and you feel it, well, your feelings are not a true barometer of truth. You can be wrong. The Bible says you can be wrong, because the Bible says, let God be true and every man a liar. So you're a liar, Jay.
Bingo. Right. We're all liars.
You are. You're a liar.
Congratulations. You're a liar. I'm not. Your book is a lie. You don't understand the first thing about how to demonstrate that it's from a God.
By the way, the Book of Mormon, it's going to be chapter 10, verse 4 and 5, will literally say the same shit you're saying, Jay. that the Book of Mormon is true. And if you don't, and if you want to believe it, all you have to do is ask God, and in earnest with faith, be sure you're going to receive an answer, and then listen for it, and he will tell you. And it is the number one cited reason by Mormons that they say they believe in Mormonism, because they took what's called the promise of Moroni, and God, when they listened, they heard. So now you either need to convert to Mormonism, or upon the same level of evidence that you offered, convert to Jimmy Snowism, because with the exact same level of proof you have, I have established I am in fact God, your creator, and boy, I insist that you repent.
All religions.
I don't care. There's better theists waiting. Bye.
Hey. Oh,
sorry. Did I fuck you this time?
Yeah, that's all right. I've done it to you several times. It's all right.
What were you gonna say?
I have lots of questions, and I have ways to expose Jay's lunacy, because the question is, okay, let's see what we know about God. Is God good? Is God moral? Could God ever do anything that wasn't perfect? Could God ever create anything that wasn't perfect? Could God ever do anything that wasn't moral? Could God sanction immorality? Are men and women equal? Does the Bible hold them as equal? Is homosexuality a sin? Does the Bible hold it as a sin? Is slavery permissible? The Bible says it is. Is genocide permissible? The Bible says that it is. The Bible, the God of the Bible supposedly orders this. All of these things, but Jay has no hope of getting there.
Yeah.
And genuinely, I'm upset, and it breaks my heart to listen to someone who, when you say, how do we know this is true? Listen. How do we know this is true? Listen to the words. How do we know this is true? He's advocating for a method where if you read it and it resonates with you, it must therefore be the truth. And that mechanism, which is exactly what Jimmy was pointing out, that mechanism is indistinguishable from Jimmy writing it down because it resonates with me. Hold that picture up again, Jimmy. It really resonates with me. I read that thing and I just knew. I listened to the words and I knew that Jimmy was God. I knew that was the case. It encroaches on every fiber of my being. Hallelujah! Praise Jimmy.
Do you know my favorite part of this? Sorry, I just got the Zoom back up so I can show you. I just realized, and our British fans will enjoy this. In attempting to write the cursive G, I believe I've written the cursive S. And that says that it is signed by Sod, not God.
Well, there's Sod, there's Zod, there's God, Dodd, Bod, Cod, Fod. It's just so frustrating because there's some sort of it's a partial language barrier. I don't mean it in the sense that we're speaking different languages, but there's a conceptual barrier.
Yes.
And Jay is on the other side of that conceptual barrier, where for Jay, truth is whatever he feels is truth. And yet he wouldn't use that method for any other question. How do we, I have here my passport. I've got it because I need to go get it renewed and I need to put a rush on it. But if somebody were to say, how do we know that this passport is actually a real passport for the United States of America? Well, it says United States of America right on there. Yes, right. But saying it doesn't make it so. Well, you can go in and look at it. Yes, but there are fraudulent passports. We know that there are fraudulent passports. Well, this one, yes. What's the criteria? Same thing with the dollar bill in my wallet. How do we know it's not a counterfeit?
Yeah.
Well, you just look at it. Okay. Thanks for nothing.
Yeah.
I 20 years and it still gets to me that there are people out there who are proud of the fact that they believe something, who have no understanding of what a good reason would be at all. And they're happy to call in and act like we're the lunatics.
Right.
While they vote and take away people's rights.
I was even going to say, I was going to ask, and then I just figured there was no reason to. There was no point, but at one point I was going to ask, do you know what circular reasoning is? And I think the reason I'm bringing it up is you brought up that conceptual barrier. That is the barrier. There are people who have familiarized themselves with logical fallacies, with bias fallacies, with all of these things our brain does to trick us. and to make us feel more confident and better. And they naturally appear amongst everybody, and they are something you have to, especially in society, learn your way out of. And that was the conceptual barrier, the circular reasoning. As soon as I heard the chuckle, I wasn't even sure we were actually engaging with an honest interlocutor, but that's just how I feel every time. The good news is, while I did cut him off early, we now have 3 theist calls. And I just want to say to people in the future, call earlier in the show. We have a hard stop at 5. Call earlier in the show, please. But we will try and get through at least all 3 of these. To the couple of atheist callers that are here, I'm guessing we're not going to get to your calls. So those of you who can hear me on hold, it's unlikely we're going to be able to hit all 3 theists and the 2 atheist calls. So I'm just giving you that now. If you want to stay on, you can. Otherwise, call back any of the shows this week, which, again, really great shows this week to call back on.
I think let's try the new theist caller first.
Sure.
Rather than one of the repeat ones, just to see if maybe we get something slightly different. So James in Illinois, pronouns are he, him. Welcome to the Sunday show. You're on with Matt and Jimmy.
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Delightful.
I think I'm getting ready to agree with you.
I'm the son of Sod.
Okay. Good for you. But it's big fans, been listening to you for years, big fan. So I called Billy about mythicism. I'm a Catholic myself, but mythicism just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't seem to correspond with the evidence we have for the historical Jesus, and it doesn't line up with, the first century evidence we have. Everything we have about Jesus from the first century is person from Nazareth crucified by Pontius Pilate, and I honestly think a lot of it is anti-religious bias.
Okay, so I'm not a mythicist, and I don't think Jimmy's a mythicist either.
I'm not.
So you're calling into two people who aren't mythicists to say you have a problem with mythicism. I'd recommend you call like when John Gleason's on, because he's on occasion on various shows on this network, and he is a mythicist, and he could defend his position. I can't defend his position because I don't share it. However, I will say that what you think we have about Jesus, we don't. We do not have a single independently corroborated contemporary shred of evidence for his existence. None. We have no eyewitness accounts, no chronicles from anybody. Now, that doesn't prove that somebody didn't exist, but if you cannot verify independently any single bit of somebody's life, I don't think that it doesn't take a lot of bias to suggest that maybe that person didn't exist.
Yeah, James, I think you might be confused. You might not be too. Maybe I'm being brash and drawing conclusions, but mythicism refers to the position where you are prepared to take the burden of proof and say, not I don't believe Jesus existed, not I'm agnostic, but to actually say Jesus, the historical figure, not just the mythical figure, does not exist. And I'm willing to say that I have a sufficient evidence to consider the matter proven, to take that burden of proof on. Most atheists are not mythicists. Many atheists will be somewhat, I would say I'm agnostic, to use the term poorly and colloquially, but I'm agnostic to the proposition. I understand that as far as a historical figure goes, there are other figures throughout history that we say were there. Many of them won't have been. And then there are figures that people like Alexander the Great, who there definitely was a person for, but the stories of Alexander the Great are mostly stolen from other people and other stories too. And so there's tons of additions. And so the Alexander the Great that we think existed did not exist, but an Alexander the Great likely did. And so as far as the concept of it's just anti-Christianity, and you've said you're a Catholic, I don't agree that that is the motivation. I think the motivation of the mythicists who are most popular for writing on it, so people like David Fitzgerald, people like Richard Carrier, is the conspicuousness of how similar the story of Jesus is to other things which have met a more sufficient burden of proof to say this was just a magical story from that time period, and that there's a lot of crossover. And so these are people who are often, I think David Fitzgerald I'm very sorry, David. If everyone take this with a grain of salt, because I'm only 70% sure he said it on a collab recently, but I believe he's a Muhammad mythicist too. So and he would probably also say, as far as his mythicism with Jesus Christ goes, he actually, I don't know if it's he, I know I've seen John say it, that there are versions of a historical version of Jesus, a person whom they picked out and are ascribing everything to, that they aren't closed off to that possibility still. However, everything else, the baggage that comes with it, they are closed off to. So I don't know. I hope I've cleared up anything that I feel like I was detecting might be a confusion with you. And if I have, I'd like to then move on to why are you a Catholic if you are evaluating evidence claims in the first place and saying this seems to be poorly evident mythicism, but
the thing about the mythicism, I have looked into it, and I listened to a lot of Bart Ehrman.
Sorry, did you just say have or have not looked into it?
Oh no, I have looked into it. Like I know, Paul was writing in the 50s about Jesus. He knew Peter. He knew Jesus' brother James. He quoting pre-Pauline creeds that probably go back to the 40s, if not the late 30s, that talks about the post-resurrection appearances and the crucifixion. I just seem like the evidence all seems to be pointing in one direction. The evidence we do have. That's my issue.
Well, okay. So I get we're getting ready to kind of shift gears here a little bit, because Jimmy was asking, why are you a Catholic? Setting aside the mythicism, because neither of us are mythicists. The issue here is, like, I'm not a mythicist because I think mythicism adopts a burden of proof that it can't meet. But I'm also not a Catholic because I think Catholicism adopts a burden of proof that it has not met. And I don't see any way that it reasonably could right now. But you clearly think that Catholicism has met its burden of proof, even though mythicism hasn't. And so I'm like, how did Catholicism meet its burden of proof to satisfy your view that Jesus not only existed, that Jesus not only existed, but was in fact God and still exists and was born of a virgin, was a perpetual virgin. And when you take the Eucharist, it actually changes into the DNA of Jesus. I mean, those are all claims that are part of the Catholic doctrine. And I don't see a proof for any of them. So could you demonstrate like one of them?
I cannot demonstrate them. Certainly not. No, I cannot demonstrate them.
Then when you call in,
go ahead.
Hang on. If you say you can't demonstrate them, when you call in to ask, to basically say it seems ridiculous for you that there are people who are mythicists, can you understand why it seems ridiculous to me there are people who are Catholics?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So why are you a Catholic then?
I'm sure you heard this a million times. I feel I have a personal relationship with the living Lord, and I feel like Catholicism best lines up with my view on that relationship.
What's the nature of that relationship? Can you give an example of it?
Relationship with, sure. I have seen the effect of my prayers and my actions in my life. It makes me a better husband and father.
No, that's not. I need something specific because so basically, are you saying that prayers have been answered?
Yeah, many of them.
Okay, just give me one. Just give me one prayer that you think has been answered by God.
My brother was in a very bad marriage, and I prayed for God to find him a way out of it. He was also in a bad career to find himself a better career. And both things happen. I can't draw a straight line to God. But
James.
Yes, sir.
We're trying to go through this. So I said, give me a prayer that you think was answered. Your brother was in a bad relationship and a bad career, and you asked for God to fix both of those things, and both of those things changed. How do you know that God did anything to do that?
I do not know.
Okay. And yet, this is sufficient for you to think that God did something. And so you have no way to demonstrate it to anybody, including yourself, and yet you believe it. Why did God allow your brother to be in a bad relationship and a bad career in the first place?
I can't say. My best way to answer that is that allow free will to people make their own decisions. But I have no.
But then no, James, you can't then argue that God stepped in and took away that free will. If God let your brother fuck up his life a little bit, and then God comes in and fixes it, what was the purpose of having him fuck up his life in the first place? Why did he have free will to screw it up, and then God took his free will away to implement the life you wanted him to have?
Well, maybe so he could learn from experiences and learn his lessons.
Okay, so in that case, it's not the free will that's important. It's God wanted to teach your brother a lesson.
Well, I think God allows us to make mistakes and then learn from them.
Okay, so what you think about God? So wow, this is so frustrating watching you kind of tap dance through this.
Yeah, it's so inconsistent.
Well,
it is when it's convenient for what you believe, God will step in, and when it's convenient for what you believe, God will let you learn a lesson. And when it's convenient for what you believe, God will, allow other people to pray on your behalf to override those lessons. Do you have some evidence or some prayer that clearly shows that a God did anything? And if not, which I think you've already said you don't, why would you believe that God did if you don't have a good reason? Because you seem to be admitting that you believe without a good reason.
Right. So, yeah, I see where you're coming from here. Yeah. So let me slow down for a second.
Okay.
I come with the my position, is a position of faith. I have believed my whole life. I feel that it makes me a better person, and it made my life much better. And also, I do feel that the relationship is real. I can't fully describe it. I can't demonstrate it, but I do feel personally that this relationship is real, and that I've seen the effect of it all my life.
James.
As far as
James, do you believe Mormons are correct and have personal relationships with God?
Do I believe Mormons have personal relationship with God? I don't know.
Do you think that their religion is true?
No, I do not think
so. Everything you just said about faith, I have said as a Mormon, and have heard people who are currently Mormons say. So, should it matter whether or not you both can't be correct at the same time, right?
No.
Okay.
We both can't
if you're wrong, do you want to know? Does it matter to you that you only believe in true things?
Does it matter to me that I only believe in truth? I want to believe in true things.
Okay, and you don't want to believe in false things, correct?
Well, I'd rather not.
So if you and the same Mormon with the exact same reasoning for believing both say, I only want to believe this if it's true, and I don't want to believe it if it's false, and you right now say to the Mormon, I believe your religion is false, how would you prove to the Mormon that their religion is false in a way that wouldn't also prove your religion false too?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wouldn't tell them, I wouldn't directly tell them that religion is false.
Why?
I don't agree with you.
Because it might make you have to face the truth that yours is false.
Well, but I don't know it to be false.
You don't know it to be true. You don't know either of them to be true.
True. I don't know neither to be true.
So
I don't really know a lot about
Mormonism. James, pretend I'm the Mormon in front of you, and I'm saying, James, if you don't believe my religion is true, I give you permission to be as harsh as you want to be. All I want to know is, why is my religion not true and yours is? And that's all I want to know. I'm desperate to make sure I get the right God. So please tell me why yours is true and mine isn't.
I'm not educated enough on Mormonism to say the difference. I never been to a Mormon church. I really don't know much about it.
I don't.
So you have this thing where there's a religion that you're aware of, and you don't think it's true, but you've never studied it to find out if it's true. What if Mormonism is true and Catholicism is false, and you just never took the time to investigate Mormonism to find out that it's true? Then to me, when you say you care about whether or not your beliefs are true, that's not true. If you care whether or not your beliefs are true, then you do two things. You look for a mechanism that will help you identify whether or not your beliefs are in fact true or are likely to be true. And you will also investigate various claims to see if they are true. But you haven't investigated Mormonism, and you haven't found any mechanism to show whether or not your Catholicism is true. So how can you claim to care about truth given that conflict?
I suppose the best way I can answer this is that about why I believe in Catholicism, why I'm a Catholic, is the relationship I have and the views I with the Lord, and the views I have studied Catholicism. I do believe it's a church that goes back to the apostles of Jesus. Again, so from a Christian claim, I think it has the best claim to be that. As far as can I demonstrate it being true, I cannot. I mean, I can.
But wait, James, didn't Matt already just run through with you? You said you believe it has the best claim to be fact, but you are unfamiliar with any other claim, or at least Mormonism at minimum.
I'm familiar with Mormonism. I know it was founded by Dr. Smith.
So actually, then great, James. So you're implying here that there are claims of Christianity that you are familiar with that you don't accept, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so what's one of those?
Justification by faith alone.
Sorry, what is one of the religions you are familiar with? That is not. We can do the individual claim if you like, but what is one of the religions that you can say you are familiar enough with to say Catholicism is correct and they are wrong?
Protestantism.
Okay. And why is Protestantism, that's a hard word to say.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Why is that false, but Catholicism is true?
Well, I believe, I don't believe, if you have, well, first off, I think they hold the Bible to a standard of idolatry. I think solo scripture doesn't make sense. It does not support it scripturally.
Okay.
I think.
Wait. We're just going to stop right there. I'm the Protestant now. Catholicism has fallen for the sin of idolatry with the Bible. What was your second reason that Protestantism is wrong?
Protestantism has fallen to the idolatry of the Bible.
Well, and then what was the second one? No, I know. I'm saying
Jimmy is saying.
Okay.
I'm
James,
the
Stop.
Oh,
I want to clear this up.
Sorry.
Jimmy is saying, he's responding to you as if he were a Protestant, saying, no, Catholicism is the one that has resulted to the idolatry of the Bible. And I, as an actual former Protestant, would say, no, Catholicism has formed idolatry with regard to idolizing Mary and the saints and praying to them and doing things that aren't biblical. Catholicism took the Bible, added a bunch of stuff to it that is not orthodox, and goes down that route. So you can do the same thing to Catholicism from the Protestant standpoint that you can do to Protestantism from the Catholic standpoint. The point Jimmy's trying to get to is what method do we use to tell who's right, Protestants or Catholics or neither?
Well, far between Protestants and Catholics, I think you just look at the arguments and address the claims. If two people are
you literally said nothing. What method do you have to show whether Protestantism or Catholicism is true? You don't have any.
No, I don't.
So you were saying, and you were raised Catholic, right? How convenient that you were raised with the right one and you think the other ones aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have looked into Protestant.
You haven't looked into anything.
Not Mormonism.
You haven't looked into anything. Hang on, you haven't looked into anything if you haven't looked into mechanisms to discern truth. If otherwise, without a method to tell which is true, you are like a leaf on the wind, and you got blown into Catholicism because that's where your family was.
Yeah, which is why I was Mormon.
Okay.
If you can't come up with a better reason. Oh, sola scriptura doesn't mean it doesn't make sense to me. No, that's what you were taught.
Right.
Oh, Protestants have made the Bible an idol. No, that's what you were taught. You have no evidence that that's what Protestants are doing. You have no mechanism to show that that's even wrong. that these 66 books in the Protestant Bible, you have no way of showing there should be anything else beyond those. Meanwhile, do you go to church? Do you go to Catholic church?
Oh, yes. I went this morning.
So you support, do you donate money to the Catholic Church?
I put money in the basket, sure.
Sure. So you contribute to a criminal organization because you're convinced that it is correct when you don't have any way of showing it's correct.
Well, I mean, this is a bit off topic, but it is a very large charitable organization. They do a lot of good in the world.
Oh my God.
It doesn't matter. Oh my God. Do you think Hitler didn't love his mom? You contribute to a criminal organization that opposes safe sex, that opposes divorce, that actually hides child raping priests from prosecution and shuffles them around. That is not an organization that is of any good, God. That is a corrupt criminal organization that fills its coffers and does things ostensibly that look good. Mother Teresa was a gruesome individual who idolized pain. And yet you don't have a mechanism for truth, but you're willing to contribute to a criminal organization. Do you see why? I mean, if you had a good reason, I could maybe take it easier, but you're basically saying, I don't have a good reason, and I contribute to this organization because they do a lot of good, but they also do a lot of harm. Okay, well, congrats that they did some good. I mean, I've been to Catholic hospitals. Unfortunately, one of the things that happens at Catholic hospitals is if somebody goes in and has a miscarriage, they not only do they get, essentially they have to have 2 funerals, one for the fetus and then another one for the afterbirth. There's also procedures that Catholic hospitals won't do because it violates their religion. And while Catholics are generally better on evolution than Protestants are, and they're better on some sciences than Protestants are, and they probably have better schools than some other private schools, it's still a way to prop up beliefs that aren't justified, and they're doing harm. How many children is it okay to excuse as rape victims in order to keep putting money into the coffers because you think some of it's going to go to help the hungry?
No, none. Listen, I am appalled by what they did.
How many children would an organization need to cover up the rape for before you will stop supporting them?
I don't know. Sir,
I don't know either.
I know
also,
where you're coming from.
James, hang on. Yes, James, sir. This is not targeted at you. I don't mean to beat up at you.
Sure, go ahead.
No, what I'm saying is what I just said is not just you. This is what shocks me, is that you and I both know, and it's not just the Catholic Church. Protestants have the same problem as the Catholic Church. They're just not as robust about it. But I could not continue to support an organization that I knew was actively involved in covering up and hiding real harms that we know have happened. I couldn't do it. And yet religions have convinced you that you need to keep supporting them because they also do good, even if there's some bad apples in there. I don't ever have to give a penny to any organization that is covered up for the rape of a child. Ever. I don't have to make excuses for it. And you know what, James? Neither do you. You can keep your God belief and ditch the Catholic Church.
Yeah, James, I want to make a request before we move on because we do have a couple more theists to go on here. Sure. What I want, I'm going to ask you to do this. I hope you do it. I want you to sit down. It can be with a legal pad if you like, as I've got here. But I want you to sit down and I want you to divide a piece of paper into 2. And on the left side, you're going to write good reasons I believe in the Catholic Church or the Catholic God, or you could just say Catholic Church / God. And then on the right side, I want you to write good reasons other people should believe in the Catholic Church / God. And then next Sunday, preferably about 2.5 hours earlier than you called today, right at the beginning of the show, I want you to call at the beginning of the show. I want to put you on first with Matt and I and talk about the reasons, the good reasons for you to believe and the good reasons for others to believe. Because today, you weren't even calling for this topic, and I'm totally willing to give you the benefit of the doubt that given a minute to be able to think this out, maybe put your thoughts to paper, you're going to have an easier time articulating the topic that then got brought up.
I appreciate your call and your willingness to answer questions.
I appreciate you guys' time. Real quick though, what time do y'all start accepting callers? Central.
What time zone are you in?
I'm in Illinois. We're in Central Time Zone.
Okay, so you're in the same as us. 2:00 is when the show starts. Usually the lines open half an hour early. Today it was definitely half an hour early. If you call by 10 till 2, you'll be good, and we'll see that you're in there. And
that's good. That's good, guys. The mass is at 11, so I can make it work.
Sure.
There you go. You can come right after mass.
That was a joke.
It's still good.
All right, guys, listen, I really appreciate it. Y'all gave me a lot to think about. Really enjoyed the conversation. It went down a road I wasn't expecting, but hey, so does life. That's okay.
Yeah, but we got a plan.
Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah.
And I will talk to y'all next Sunday, okay?
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
All right, y'all take care.
If he does call next Sunday, that'll be the most successful call of this Sunday. This will be the most successful call this Sunday if he also calls next Sunday. You're welcome to pick between. I'm going to suspend new calls. John on line 6, I think will be extremely fast, but maybe not. Cool.
Hello, I'm here.
Hey, John in San Antonio. Pronouns are they, them. Thanks for calling. You're on the Sunday show with Jimmy and Matt.
Yes. Where do you want to start with this? I said God is self-evident and an objective fact in reality.
So if God is self-evident, then there's no argument for it. It's just obvious, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how can you argue for something that is self-evident?
I'm not arguing for it. I'm just simply pointing out the facts. I'm not really arguing about it. I'm just
okay. Well, if all your entire point is to say that God is self-evident,
methodologies,
your entire point
ideologies, and that's what.
Wow, can you not hear me?
I'm lagging out a little bit.
Sure. So pause for a second. Here, I tell you what we'll do. I'm going to mute you, then I'll unmute you when I'm done asking. So when you say God is an objective, self-evident concept that has always existed, how can you know that apart from just saying it's to you it's self-evident? Is there anything else other than you think it's self-evident?
It's not just me that came to this conclusion throughout history. Everyone has been saying there is. It's not just me. I'm not the only one drawing this conclusion.
I'm not drawing that conclusion. Which God is it that you think is self-evident? Can you give me characteristics of that God?
God is self-forming, an infinite self-forming conscious being.
Okay. Infinite, self-forming, conscious being. And you say that it's self-evident that an infinite self-forming conscious being exists. Why would it need to be self-forming? Why wouldn't it just have always existed and then therefore be not forming at all?
Well, that's the part where I said it's infinite because it has always existed in an infinite state. The self-forming part is where
what I'm saying is infinite and self-forming. What do you mean by self-forming? Because that seems like self-originating.
Self-forming refers to self-organization.
Okay,
infinite
but
refers to the fact
why
that
why would it need to be organizing if it always was?
Because it was in a chaotic state at one point when what we perceive to be chaos.
So to you, it's self-evident that at some point this conscious being was in an unformed chaotic state and then self-formed. So it changed from being chaotic to being orderly at some point.
Yes.
How long did that take?
Well, time is like we're talking about before the Big Bang, right? So
I don't know when did it happen
at this point.
You tell me. You're the one that's saying that this infinite conscious being went from being chaotic to orderly. When did that happen?
Well, some say it took eternity. Some say it took a long time. There's no way to measure it. There's no way to measure time when there's no sense of relativity.
Right. There's no way to measure time outside of time. And so how can something go from being chaotic to orderly without time? It doesn't, because it takes time to do something.
You're only perceiving it from your
No, I'm not asking. No, sir. No, John. This is not John. This is not about how I perceive it. You're the one making an assertion. Your assertion so far is that there was an infinite, chaotic, conscious being that at some point outside of time became orderly. And I'm saying, how does that work? Because any change requires time. And so if you're saying outside with no time, absence of time, something went from chaotic to orderly. When did that happen? And how do you know? Because you're claiming all of this is self-evident, and it's not evident to me at all that there's a conscious being that could possibly exist outside of time. It's not evident to me that anything could exist outside of time, since existence is necessarily temporal. And it's not self-evident to me that anything that could be chaotic could self-organize and do so absent time. So I'm kind of stuck, because you're claiming something is self-evident that I find preposterous and contradictory.
Yeah, and that's why I go back to say the state of consciousness you're in right now is limiting your ability to comprehend.
Are you in the same state of consciousness that I'm in? Are you in the same state of consciousness that I'm in? You're not.
I doubt it.
So my state of consciousness is limited, but yours isn't.
I think I'm more aware. I think there's different levels of consciousness that could be more aware of.
How do you demonstrate that? How do you demonstrate the truth of what you're saying? That there are different levels of consciousness and that you are more aware. How do you demonstrate that?
Well, first, I think we could all agree there's like a rat has a certain level of consciousness that doesn't equal ours. Can we agree to that at least?
No, and how many rats do you have? Because I have about 300 rats right now. And what I can say is that while their cognitive abilities are not necessarily the same as ours, I don't know how to put those in comparison. And that's completely separate from whether or not consciousness has levels. My rats appear to be consciousness at the same level as anybody else. Consciousness seems to be pretty much a static level.
Pan-antheism, correct? Yeah.
Wait, I'm hearing...
I was verifying something on YouTube and I thought my mic was muted. Hey, John, why did you change your name from Clark after you were banned from calling the show? No answer?
Well, setting that aside, John, since of the two of us, I'm the one that's the expert on rats.
They hung up. Fuck you.
You ran off.
Fuck you in your fucking face. This was the person who called and attacked your blood pressure and started saying a bunch of shit, and then also called me a philosophy slow boy because I wasn't going down their track of sublating the principles and whether or not moral claims are propositional and their fucking 20 claim long proposition that I said I would shop around and see if anybody wanted to debate. And then he was such an absolute asshole that we cut off. This is a person who's trying to get around the ban, who has been owned time after time. And by the way, after calling me a philosophy slow boy, and I believe using another ableist slur, then called back to argue with Matt and I on a different day and revealed, I'm very tired, revealed that...
That's pretty good, though.
Revealized is nice. I'm the philosophy slow boy. However, John/Clark is not familiar with what solipsism is. You remember that one, Matt?
I kind of do. And the voice was kind of similar. I just noticed that he had called before. So
yeah,
it was fine. It's funny. I'm still, despite the fact that he was a troll, he could have been honestly presenting what he believes. But the second that you want to claim that you're on a higher level or different level of consciousness from other humans, while fundamentally getting some concepts wrong, and then finding out that you're going to talk about rats when I have hundreds of them that I interact with daily.
Yeah.
It's very strange to me, because if in fact he was on a higher level of consciousness, I don't ever want to be on that level of consciousness, because I don't want to sound like an uninformed douche nozzle.
Yeah. The reason I figured out it was, okay, so this time they called in with they, them pronouns just out of an abundance of caution. I will continue to use them. When they had called as Clark, they had different pronouns. The reason I realized was when they started bringing up the time stuff. This was also the caller who, when it is revealed that they believe specifically in the Christian God, and I start asking, so do you believe that Jesus literally was resurrected in the past? Would not say, basically said they don't adhere to our standard of time and how time works, and that time, and then tried to start quoting Einstein in ways they didn't understand. This is an ableist asshole of a person who we banned from the show for using multiple slurs and then making remarks about Matt's weight and stuff. So,
hey, my weight's fucking awesome. So, I mean, I want to get further down, but I mean, considering I spent the last 20 years around 260 and now I'm much closer to 200. Cool. But, we only got a couple of minutes left and there's two theist callers on there. I don't know what to do.
I'll let Aron know that we'll be a little bit late because we have auto redirect on. Aron doesn't matter when I'm late, when that usually ends up bringing at least 500 people with us to read the Book of Mormon.
Let's try and do these reasonably quickly. Then we've got Christian and Georgia, who has
hi. Hello.
It just says objections to the idea of hell in the Bible. So maybe we agree.
Oh well, yeah, maybe. I have to ask you about that actually, but. First of all, I didn't know you had hundreds of rats. I never knew that about you.
I have 60 some odd snakes, and so they have to eat.
That's radical. So yeah, I'm a Christian. That shouldn't surprise you, given the name. But whenever a lot of
I wrote the Gospel of Matthew.
Kind of a casual when it comes
that
to
shouldn't surprise you, given the name.
Whoa. One kind of objection to Christianity that I hear a lot is specifically the idea of hell being kind of like immoral or bad. I would personally argue, which is why I'm here, I would argue that the idea of hell is if you take your feelings out of it and kind of look at the big picture, it makes not only does it make sense, but I think it's really one of the only kind of things that can make sense in terms of an afterlife or a dichotomy of where you'll go. But basically my question for you guys is why, what are your objections to hell? If you have some, why is it unappetizing perhaps?
Well, first of all, I think when you say when you take your feelings out of it, sure. When you take your feelings out of it, nothing's bad, right?
Are you asking me seriously?
He's making an amazing point, Christian.
I didn't know. I thought that was a rhetorical question, but sure.
Yeah. Well, when your argument begins with "let's take our feelings out of it," you might as well. Hey, I believe in God, but let's take evidence out of it. I mean, that's what this comes down to. And so,
well, not necessarily.
Let me ask you.
I'm asking
No. It is, but let me ask you this.
I'm on a delay.
Who goes to hell? If I spend my life doing good things, and I just don't happen to believe that Jesus is Lord, do I go to hell?
Mm-hmm.
And you think that's a good thing?
In the Christian worldview, first of all, no one's good, right? There's no man's good, no, not one. But secondly,
I understand.
If you don't believe the gospel, then you would go to hell.
Okay. And what happens to me in hell?
Well, it's definitely not something good, but basically and eternal kind of regret, mental anguish, possibly.
But you said that was a good thing. You started off by saying that it was a good thing, and now you said nothing good. So which is it?
Well, going to hell isn't good, but I think the idea of hell being a punishment for evil is good. It's just, okay. Rather, we'll say that.
So if you and I live a life where we do roughly the same amount of good things and evil things, where we harm just the same number of people and we help the same number of people, and then you believe this credulous claim that Jesus is divine and I don't, you go on to heaven and I go to hell, and you think that this system is good. What's good about it?
Oh yeah, that's easy. Yeah. The reason why hell makes sense is because it's kind of like a 2 or 3-fold thing. If I remember the third one, then it's threefold. But one is that God is just, right? Like in the Christian worldview, you can argue against it, some other time, but in the Christian worldview, God is perfectly holy. He's infinitely holy, in fact, and by doing so, by virtue, he has to punish evil, right? So, that's one reason why hell makes sense, is because God has to punish evil once and for all, and no sin should go unpunished. Secondly, the reason why hell makes sense is because, and the reason why it's not, I'll say morally dubious, is because it's very simple to avoid it. Essentially, the idea of hell is it's something which we all deserve because we're all sinners.
Yeah, I'm stuck on
I need you to pause. I need you to pause because I asked you, I gave you a scenario, and I said, you think this system is good, where if you and I live, let's just say, roughly equivalent lives, and you believe and I don't, that me going to hell is a good thing, and you say it's a good thing because God is perfectly just and no sin should go unpunished, but your sins went unpunished, and there's nothing just about...
No. Absolutely not.
What do you mean, absolutely not?
Well, he believes in forgiveness by proxy, so Jesus was punished for his sins. He's not going to be punished for them, but you will be punished for yours for not believing.
I understand that. I believe the same thing, but what I'm... Oh my God, never fucking mind. Never fucking mind if I'm not going to finish a fucking sentence without you fucking interrupting me with your terrible fucking idea about what justice is, then why should I fucking talk to you?
Oh, I apologize, man. I wanted to speak on behalf of my worldview instead of the other gentleman, but
I'm asking you questions.
Go ahead.
I'm asking. Oh, you're going to let me finish? You're going to let me finish? Are you going to let me finish? Tell me you're going to let me finish one more motherfucking time. Okay. Now, first of all, your idea is that God is perfectly just, and that is why hell makes sense. But why is it perfectly just for two people who've had the same impact on society and the same values, for one of them to be sent to heaven and one of them to be sent to hell, where the only disparaging criteria, the only difference in the criteria, is whether or not someone is convinced of the divinity of Jesus? What about not being convinced of the divinity of Jesus is so evil that it requires one to be tortured forever? What is just about that?
Yeah, so the idea of not accepting or not trusting in the divinity of Christ, I guess you would say it's sinful, right? But it's essentially the idea that you're choosing to personally take in the penalty of sin, whereas I'm trusting in Jesus to give me his imputed righteousness on me. So it's not that I'm less deserving of hell, because we all deserve it, right? But
no, we don't. None of us fucking deserve it. That's part of the problem. But okay, Paul, here, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to mute you, and then I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and then I'll unmute you. You're saying, I asked specifically, why not believing was evil enough to deserve eternal torment? And your answer was, I'm choosing to take on the penalty of sin. No, I'm not convinced that sin is a real concept. I'm not convinced there should be a penalty for it. I am not convinced that substitutionary atonement is real. I'm not convinced of divinity. See, you can't say that it makes sense if you accept the doctrine when I don't accept the doctrine. And so what is it that is just about torturing someone forever for failing to believe the doctrine?
Mm-hmm. First of all, again, I'm on a delay, so I apologize.
No, don't blame the delay. When the show started, Matt had only said your name and was continuing the sentence, and you began talking. You are an eager to jump in person. Just own that. Is there going to be a delay that will occasionally cause issues? Sure. We have the delay down to a regular phone call. You've used the phone before. You do not blame your eagerness to jump in on the delay. Period.
Do you need me
now
to
go
repeat
ahead.
the question?
Well, I live in the woods, so it is a frequent thing. So
doesn't account for why you started talking over him at the very beginning of the call.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
If you would like to, please go ahead.
Okay. How is eternal torment for not accepting a doctrine justified?
It's justified, as I said earlier, because God has to punish evil. If he didn't punish evil, then he would be unjust.
What is evil about not believing something?
Oh, that's a loaded question, isn't it? It's not that disbelief is evil intrinsically. It's that by doing so, you're it's unavoidable, really. By not believing in it, you're also choosing to accept the penalty of your own sin. You're basically putting yourself under the law.
No, your argument that you just made, the argument that you just made right there is assuming that I accept that there is sin and punishment and all that. I don't accept the doctrine. How is that evil, and how is that deserving of eternal punishment?
Well, I'm talking in the internally in the Christian worldview. If I don't, you being accepted of it, it could be real and not real. That doesn't change anything,
Jesus
right? Like,
Christ.
Wow. Do you not realize that I was a fundamentalist Christian? Do you not realize that I was a fundamentalist Christian who believed all this shit to begin with? You don't get to start with belief and say it's justified. You don't get to start with belief and say it's justified belief, because then you might as well be arguing God gets to do whatever God wants to do. But that makes him a bully. It doesn't make him moral. How is it just to punish someone for merely being unconvinced of a doctrine when God has failed to provide evidence for the veracity of that doctrine? Okay.
I'll try to answer it this way, perhaps. It is, I think, a bit fallacious when people think that everyone is judged the same way, right? Because the Bible does say something different. I'm sure, Matt, you would know about that, Romans 1. Those who haven't heard, people who aren't accountable, things like that. So just because you aren't convinced, as you say, of the gospel, that doesn't always mean that you'll always go to hell, because that's not always true for
But you did
all
tell
cases.
Matt earlier in the call that he will go to hell for not believing if the difference between you and him is just the not believing. So you're now contradicting yourself.
Well, yeah,
so let's get back into,
specifically,
you said
he's able-bodied, he's intelligent.
What does that have to do with anything? Jesus Christ.
Let him keep digging.
The reason why I bring that up is because that's the age of, accountability. If you're not accountable, if you haven't heard the gospel before, God is going to send you to hell for not knowing what the gospel is. And if you're a baby and you die, he's not going to send you to hell because you don't know what the gospel is. So that's why I mentioned accountability. Matt is accountable
first of all,
because
where's
he
that?
knows about Christ. Sorry?
Where's that doctrine?
If you read the book of Romans, it'll lay it out for you.
No, it doesn't actually. But how do you know that's true? See, you're acting as if hearing the gospel is the same thing as being presented with sufficient evidence to accept the gospel. You are acting as if being presented with a doctrine is identical to having sufficient warrant to believe the doctrine. I've been presented with the doctrine. I know it backwards and forwards. I've studied it all of my life. I'm not convinced that it's true. And the people, despite me for 20 years asking for people to demonstrate that it's true, have been able to present nothing but fallacies and emotional appeals that don't reference evidence. Where is God? Why can't God demonstrate this is true? And how can it possibly be just to punish someone for not believing when there's insufficient evidence?
Sure. I'll answer your first question about like how can we demonstrate God. I would need to clarify, like, what evidence would you be looking for? Like empirical for some reason, or like an argument, perhaps?
No,
I'm not
Christian,
one
why don't you
historical.
do the work? How about you come up with the evidence and not ask us
I'm
to do your
asking what
fucking
evidence you would
homework for
expect.
you?
Like, what are you looking for?
I have
I'm asking
no
what are you looking
idea.
for?
I've answered it. Stop. I've answered this a million times. I don't know what evidence would convince me, but if there is a God, God should know what evidence would convince me, and God has failed to present that. Either way, it's not my fault. It's not my problem. I have no way of knowing what sort of evidence could and should demonstrate the truth of a God. But you think that you have sufficient evidence for belief in a God. So instead of asking me what would convince me, why don't you demonstrate what convinced you? And then I can either say, aha, I agree, you have good standards of evidence, I'm now convinced, or here's your problem.
All right, that kind of takes away the burden on you, right? But I can do that, sure.
There is no fucking burden on me.
No
I'm gonna, look,
if you don't have
look, shut up. I do not have a burden of proof. The claim that God exists has a burden of proof, just like the claim the Loch Ness Monster exists has a burden of proof, just like the claim that Bigfoot exists has a burden of proof. The fact that I don't know what would convince me doesn't change the fact that you are fucking convinced. You have a standard of proof that you think is reasonable, that you are now convinced by. Instead of dancing around and trying to blame me, saying I'm shifting the burden of proof, why don't you meet the burden of proof, which you already fucking have?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, sir, but if you don't know what evidence would convince you, I can't help you. Like, it's just me.
Goodbye,
It
then.
convinced
Goodbye.
Me, but I can't help
Goodbye.
you. Okay,
Goodbye.
Bye.
You can't help anybody because you are a coward who won't present the evidence for why you believe. Yeah, you hung up. Run away, bitch.
Of course.
Run away.
Literally, when asked what evidence convinced you, he goes with what would convince you back. That wasn't the question. Do your own work and stop weaponizing your fucking ignorance, you goddamn boob.
I can't help you. You're
Just
correct.
kidding.
You can't. You know why you can't? Because you don't listen.
Yeah.
You can't help me because you don't have good standards of evidence. You can't help me because you won't present the evidence that convinced you that you think should be convincing to other people. You want to try to figure out, this ain't my fucking first day at this job.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is you want me to say, I would need evidence like this. And then you can say, well, that's your problem. You're just too skeptical. You have standards of evidence that are just too high. God's not going to meet that because blah, 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 blah. I've been down this road for 20 years, pretty much, or 19 and a half years. I've been down this over and over and over again. I'm fucking 10 yards better understanding in this than you have ever been. And you're a little coward. Oh, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. You couldn't present an argument for how hell is justified or how God is just. All you did was say that God is perfectly moral. Well, that's an unfounded fucking assertion. It's not an argument or evidence. All you did was say that no sin should go unpunished, but you failed to acknowledge that all of your sins go unpunished because you buy into the concept of substitutionary atonement, as if your sins don't have to be punished because God can choose to forgive you whether you deserve it or not. But why wouldn't God choose to forgive someone who honestly does not accept the doctrine? God should be able to forgive whoever he wants. You have a train wreck of epistemology and a train wreck of Christian doctrine that I used to share, and you can sit there and smugly go, I can't help you. I know. And you know what? I can't help you because Christianity has poisoned your brain to the point where you won't listen to reason, you won't defend your positions, you cannot give answers that aren't just spewing up, vomiting up the fact that you accepted doctrine. Well, congratulations. You accept the doctrine that I accepted once upon a time, and now I don't, because I learned why I shouldn't, and you haven't learned that yet. You could have if you'd have been willing to present your case so that I could answer it, but instead you decided to turn it around and make it about me. It ain't about me. You're the one with the God belief. You're the one with the burden of proof. I don't have a burden of proof to show that God doesn't exist.
Hell yeah. If you're one of the 2,400 people watching right now, click that like button for 7 years of unchanged luck. That's all I can promise. I can't give you more.
Last call. My apologies for taking so long to get there. Let's try and make this one awesome. John in New Jersey has a question for me.
Shit, Jimmy, Matt, my boys, I love you. I love you, bro. Hey, do you remember me? I'm John the Believer from Jersey, the Jersey guy.
Sure.
A bit.
I like you guys. Yeah, a little bit. I'm the ex-Baptist, the ex-fundamentalists. Before I ask you this question, life is stranger than fiction. I'm an ex-Baptist, an ex-fundamentalist.
Actually, John, let's go ahead and get to the question because we are 16 minutes over time right now.
Okay, here's the question. I was talking to Jen Fishburne. I believe you might have heard of her. She's an ex-Christian, ex-evangelistic.
I don't know who that is.
Evangelical. She believes that God is energy. I think she's a universalist. I just wanted to know if Jim, you two guys believe this or not.
No.
And Einstein came to the point that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Is that correct? Do you believe that?
Do I believe whether God is energy? Neither of us believe God is anything because neither of us believe in a God. Do I accept the recognized property of the universe that energy is neither created nor destroyed? Yes, I accept that.
Within the universe, what happens outside of the universe, or as if there is anything outside the universe, we don't know. But the second somebody says Einstein came to the conclusion, how is that relevant to anything? I mean, because first of all, Einstein, when he talked about God, would identify with Spinoza's God, which is not a God, not a personal God, but would identify with But what's the point?
The point is, are you, Matt? Are you and Jimmy? Are you a universalist? Do you believe that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but you believe this is your God? Do you believe that?
Again, we don't believe in anything that you would call a God.
I have no God. I don't believe in a God. Nothing that I believe could be identified as a God. I have my understanding of whether or not energy can be created or destroyed is pedestrian at best. I'm not making any declarations about it, but yeah, I think that as far that the physics behind matter and energy conversion are well established. But what's beyond that, I have no idea.
Okay. All right. I just wanted. Okay. So
why?
Because I was just curious, Jimmy.
Why are you sitting around curious about what I think without anything? You might as well. Would you call me up and say, "Hey, Matt, do you think the Phillies are a good team this year?"
It's even weirder than that. It's way weirder than that. It'd be as though Matt has said that he's a vegan and you called to ask him if he eats beef. He's established he doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't have a better one and that I invoked that term, but it's very weird. It's a very confusing thing, John, that you're calling to ask atheists if they believe in a God.
Yeah, I'm not saying I doubt you. Maybe you're just curious and felt like calling. That's cool. Yeah. But it just seems weird to me.
I'm a fucking weirdo. I'm a fucking weirdo anyway. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get you guys pissed.
John, stop.
Yeah.
You fucking weirdo. Nobody's mad at you. I'm trying to understand it. And the fact that you're weird and want to ask a weird question is fucking cool.
Okay, cool. I like you guys, by the way. You make me feel good when you talk. So I don't.
Thanks.
John, will you call next week and be our second call? Because we got another theist lined up who also was named John. We've had three Johns this show, but the last one was. And will you call next week and tell us why you're still holding on to your belief in God?
I'm going to do that for you too. I do believe in Jesus. I believe in God. But thanks for treating me good, not kicking my ass again. Okay.
We'll talk to you next week. Looking forward to it. Thanks, John.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. Like you guys. Bye.
Thanks, John. We appreciate you.
Unfortunately, one of the Johns was a John Poster, and now I have to wonder whether or not Clark was ever John's real name.
It's one of the things we've dealt with over the years, where before we had call screening, we used to on other shows jot down numbers specifically in order to make block lists and stuff like that. It's one of the things that Call In Studio and other things are surprisingly good at helping us improve. But I could, you could ban me And then I could go get Arden's phone and call in, and then I could disguise my voice and say, yes, Jimmy, I have questions for you about whether or not you think God is energy, because I know that you're not, not to pick on John, but it was right at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and we have the web caller as well, and the ease at which a person can change the appearance of what IP address they are calling from when you're already such a dishonest asshole requires only a VPN. So I imagine that was Clark John's method, but who knows?
This is so. Despite the fact that you were ill at the beginning, and there was a moment there after like an hour and some change where there was like one caller, and I was like, "Gosh, we don't have any theists, we have nothing." And then we got theists, and some of the theist callers went great. One of them, I despise the. I'm going to sit here smugly and calmly while presenting nothing. And no, it's incredibly frustrating to be asking you the same question over and over again and have you offer nothing. Oh, it's moral because it's God, and I've defined God as moral. That's the reality. Yeah. I've defined God as moral. And so one of my favorite questions to ask, which I didn't get to because he hung up because he wouldn't present his reasons for believing God was real, is how did you determine that God is the good one and Satan is the evil one?
It's a good one.
I want to know, what's the criteria?
In Mormonism, it's Jesus is the good one, Satan's the bad one, and God.
And they're like brothers, right?
Yeah, and they basically, there was a speech and debate day, and they presented their plans, and because Satan had a plan where everyone would be saved, 100% of people would be saved, and wanted the glory to be credited for the plan. He was the evil one, and Jesus was the good one because only some people would be saved, but God would get
only
the glory.
Only the good people.
Yes.
Only the good people would be saved.
Yep.
As if there was, that's one of those things is that, going back to, not to keep harping on the call, I used to believe the same things that person believed. I'm not saying I'm better than you. And I wish we'd been able to address this. Hey, we all deserve to go to hell. No, I think none of us deserve to go to hell. I think it's preposterous. Don't get me wrong. I wish there was a very special hell that actually existed specifically for the criminals in the Catholic Church and the criminals in the Muslim religion that are advocating for horrific things against children or protecting those people who are. I genuinely wish there was an extra special hell. But the notion of infinite torture for finite crimes is already corrupt. The notion of substitutionary atonement is corrupt. The notion that there is inherited sin is corrupt. The notion that you need to believe, and that what you believe is more important than what you do, is fundamentally corrupt. And you cannot argue for it by simply saying, well, that's Christian doctrine. I know what Christian doctrine is. Yeah. It's fucking corrupt. Yeah. And so the Quran is awful, and Islam. I'm doing a debate. I'm debating Friday night on Modern Day Debates. Somebody just reached out to say they want to debate, is Islam true? It'll be like the 4th or 5th time I debated this exact same worded topic. And so Friday night, I'm going to be debating Islam yet again. How much work am I going to do between now and Friday to prepare for it? Well, that's not true. I will probably spend about 30 minutes on Thursday, assuming I get done with Zelda by then, to put together a version of the opening that I gave last time.
I was going to say, you've got, if you wanted to, Transatlantic Call-In shows done no later than 5 p.m. I thought it was such a baller move, that time that you literally did a "'Cause I Wanted" the day before and went, here's how I'm going to beat you. And they still weren't ready for it. That was killer. There were 3.
I did something like that. Oh, I did something like that this week too, because the debate that I was supposed to have with a gentleman named William that I've debated before was supposed to be on is Christ's ascension reasonable?
Yeah.
And when Pints with Aquinas canceled that debate, they ultimately compensated me for the canceled debate, or partially compensated me, but it's fine. I posted what was going to be the entirety of my opening on my YouTube channel, and I sent a link to that opening to my debate opponent and said, you're the only person who has ever received an advance copy of what my opening is going to be. Like here is the opening. Hopefully this will make it so we have a better debate. And I'm gonna hope that it does.
Yeah.
But if I were a betting man, I bet it's going to turn out better for me again.
Yeah. There are three things that if I could go back in time, I would ask the screeners to ask each caller what prompted you to call in today. Because there are three things that were different, and we had lots of theist calls, though there was a little lull in the middle, I think you were mentioning a few minutes ago. The three things that were different, Matt issued a specific challenge on his Twitter or a specific topic. While we didn't hit that topic, it's still theism related, and it could be that. But no one really talked about why they went to church and what they got out of it. Today's title had a more direct title with a question mark in it, which was just, why do you believe in God? We've done that sometimes in the past. And then yesterday we released an 8-hour compilation marathon of just theist calls. It's theist call after theist call after theist call. The secret is it's almost every theist call we had in February. If people are wondering, well, I downloaded all the shows and just filtered out just to the theist shows. I think there was 1 or 2 episodes that got clipped off the end, so they'll be a part of the next compilation. And I'm curious if those three things impacted why we had more theist calls today, because more theist calls is always amazing. And in the future, I might start asking the screeners to actually ask at the beginning of a call, what prompted you to call in, or how were you aware of today's show? Are you constantly watching? Just to find out what's working and what's not working. Would be cool.
Interesting stuff.
Let's go read the Book of Mormon on Aron Ra's channel.
Sweet.
You're welcome to join if you want, though I know it's Snake Day. Sundays are busy for you.
It's one of two. Tomorrow's Rat Day. Today's part 1 of Snake Day. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also remember, join at patreon.com/calltheline. And oh my God, it's so loud. Why is that so loud? Way louder than I meant it to be, or maybe just loud in my ears. If you go on our top tier, you can become one of these patron producers and maybe see your name at the end of our shows. And as soon as, if we hit 700 subscribers before the month is over on Patreon, Matt is getting the Seth Andrew portrait tattooed on his body. And then when we hit 1,000, we'll begin a series of different members from the line, starting with Matt and I watching terrible Christian movies together as exclusive Patreon content, as well as other things to come, like our Patreon Zooms that we do from time to time. Catch all the amazing shows this week, including Shannon Q and Apologia tomorrow, Dave Warnock and Forrest Valkai Tuesday, Wednesday, Matt Dillahunty, and a surprise, mostly just because we're waiting for confirmation guests, and Arden and Katy on Thursday. Matt, last words, unless they're just goodbye, or including if they're
Go
just
fuck
goodbye.
yourself, Jimmy.
Thanks, man. We'll see ya.
Later.